Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Tobies for the year of 2020. You'll notice that I'm wearing a suit jacket, so you know it's a fancy occasion.
Must have missed the memo on that.
Well, it's just I thought everyone knew that the Tobies were fancy. As always, I'm joined by Daniel D'Souza.
What's up?
And Jeremy Cozier.
Hello.
And we're going to be talking about the best of 2020. And that means the best in film, television, video games, because there's not a lot of other great things to talk about from 2020. And this is, I think, maybe, I don't know if this is the fifth year we've been doing it. It's at least the fourth year. And I don't know how many years we've been calling it the Tobies, but it feels like ever since the beginning. So, the fifth annual Toby Awards, very prestigious. I know that everyone who's going to be nominated and winning awards today is going to be very excited about that, and we're happy to be bribed. So if any of these major motion picture studios wants to bribe us, we are easily bought. So yeah, just letting you guys know. Okay, before I guess we get into the actual festivities, we should mention kind of the structure of how this works. So we're going to be picking our top three because, all these other sites, these other outlets, they're always
These
picking
other
their
pretenders.
right.
I like to call them.
That's right. They're picking their top 10s, right? Some their top 20s, right? We're saying no. That's
we
too.
don't got time for that.
That's too easy. That's too easy. It's so easy to put a top 10 list together. Give me a break. We needed to make this difficult for ourselves, so we picked our top three. All right. There's also honorable mentions, so you could, if you want to say top five, it's hard to say. The after three, we don't number them. And then we'll also talk about a disappointment, something that we felt didn't work for us this year. We're not trying to call out the worst of the worst. I don't think that's really what that category is for. We're not trying to highlight crappy stuff, but things that we were excited for that maybe didn't hit the mark in a way that we wanted to. So, and we're going to be touching on our top three favorite films, our top three favorite television shows. How to define the difference between the two is becoming more blurry every year, but I think there's still a clear enough line. And then we'll talk about our top three favorite games of the year as well. And we can, you guys can kind of delineate that. I'll try to put timestamps in, so you guys can skip around as you see fit. What's our policy on spoilers here for these films?
It's got to be full spoilers, I think. With like maybe like a 2-minute buffer. Like if you start talking about a movie, understand that somebody may want to skip. So try not to release any spoilers right away. But eventually, inevitably, we're going to get into spoiler territory for basically anything we're talking about, I'd imagine.
I think it depends on the actual thing itself. If you feel like, as someone who's placed an item on their list, feels like that spoilers ruin too much of the movie, I would say maybe hold back. Because if you really want someone to see it in that same way, that's fair. So I'll leave it up to each individual contributor. Just make sure you warn people before you start spoiling stuff. That's all. That's all we ask here. Anything else that we need to touch on before we get into this?
I think we're good to go.
Okay. I will mention just quickly before we begin to follow us on Twitter when we become unsuspended. Our Twitter account got suspended for some reason, and I still don't know why. I filled out another appeal form today, and then I got an immediate email saying, "Oh no, you did this already." And I said, "Oh really?" Because I did that almost a month ago, and I haven't heard from them. So they've got a lot going on.
Sure.
At Twitter these days.
More important, you could argue.
Yeah, they got a lot going on. So I haven't been sending them emails every day, but I think this is going to get sorted out. And when that happens, you can follow us on @Tower of Babble Podcast on Twitter. You can also follow us for updates in the meantime on Facebook, facebook.com/Tower of Babble Podcast as well, as where you can find us. And you can go to towerofbabblepodcast.com or towerofbabble.ca to find everything we do. And you can also help support the show by heading over to patreon.com/Tower of Babblecast as well. We do a monthly film club. Dan, can you tell the folks at home what the
movie of the next month is?
Yeah.
It's The Rocketeer. In fact,
were you shaking because you couldn't remember?
I didn't remember it. Jeremy's choice, The Rocketeer.
Then you got super excited when you remembered.
He's like, "Oh yeah,
I did." So that'll be next month. Tune in for that.
Yeah, it's exciting. I really enjoy our film clubs, and I think our last one that we just did, which was Train Spotting, we kind of touched back on the previous year in the film club as well. There's a little bit of a bonus material at the end of that, so check that out if you're on one of our patrons, or if you join in this month, you can also get access to the backlog, so you can enjoy that as well. And then you know what? I should mention we got a very generous donation from a friend of the show, Jesse Graves.
Jesse.
And we confirmed that it wasn't a mistake. That's very important that we did that.
Mm-hmm.
And
so thank you for that.
So we really appreciate it. Every person who has contributed or helped support the show this year, it's made a huge difference. It really, really has. It's made the ability to do this whole video stuff. I waved my arms around for people who might be watching. It made it way more easy and doable in a way that we really weren't prepared to do before. So it's been a huge help. Thank you. Okay, let's talk about some movies. Now, typically we start with television like we always do. But this year we changed around the format because you know what? The movies of this year, there wasn't that many of them. There wasn't that many new ones. And we decided as a group, and this is something we probably should mention before we start getting to this, is that we're going to just talk about their favorite movies we saw this year that were new to us.
Right.
Okay, so we didn't restrict it to just movies that came out in the year of our Lord 2020. Okay,
I think that applies to all the categories. It's just something
That's true.
Something
That's
new
true.
that you watched within
That's
this
true.
year, within the calendar year.
It's a lot easier with the other ones where there was more new stuff.
Sure.
Right. So that we're going to start with movies just because it just doesn't. They don't feel as heavy as they might normally feel this time of year. So we'll start with that. And Jeremy, because I have no idea what your list is, we're going to start with your number 3. Jeremy, lay it on us. What's your number 3 movie of the year 2020?
Well, I don't have a number 3.
Wait, what?
Well, I
don't have a 3. I have a third.
I try to keep my list more so of things that came out this year.
Sure.
So I threw Wonder Woman in there just to have the conversation, I guess.
Okay.
Because to represent that, whether it's your disappointment or whatever.
It's
right?
weird that you mention it as a disappointment because it is also my disappointment.
Okay.
That one specifically, though, we should be very careful about spoilers
because it's new.
It's brand new.
Sure.
Right.
And I think we will have a spoiler cast. I think sometime in the next week or so.
Yeah.
Where we can really dive into it in depth. Because I think it's a movie that kind of needs it. It's just so strange. It's a very strange movie. So, Jeremy, tell us, okay, why did you put the Wonder Woman 1984 at number 3 / somewhere on your list?
Well, yeah, it's mostly just there just so I can represent it as a disappointment. I don't know if I'd put it in my top 3 or as 3. I would say 3 is vacant. It's just top 2 I have.
Right.
Didn't watch a lot of movies this year?
No, not
There's
really.
not a lot of new ones.
But yeah, for Wonder Woman, it was just so hyped going into that movie and such a long wait with those expectations, and it just you could tell what they were trying to do, but from the behind the scenes stuff and leading up to it, it's just clear that the movies have two different minds and the future of where they want these franchises to go. So it just suffers from it so much, to where I just didn't care for it really. So yeah, that's pretty much.
Well, I think it's an indictment of the year 2020 in film when Jeremy can't fill a list of 3 with new movies, and the one that he wants to talk about, he feels like is a disappointment. And it, Dan, I don't know if you thought about putting Wonder Woman on your disappointments or where you thought about putting Wonder Woman. For me, it was something that was very exciting. I was very excited about Wonder Woman. We talked about this on our stream. We did a Call of Duty stream the other night. And this movie, Wonder Woman 1984, has one of the best trailers of all time. And it's so good, and the music's so good, and it got me really excited. And the first movie was pretty good, I was like, okay, sweet, here we go.
The 80s theme that they were going with,
right.
Most people were excited about that, see what that was all about.
And sure, we were all confused. How is Steve Trevor back? That makes no sense, right? And the movie explains it in a way.
It answers the question.
It answers the question. If you find that satisfying, it's up to you.
It makes you wish you never even asked. Really.
Ooh, wish is an interesting word you use, Jeremy.
Okay, enough of
But for me, and the reason I put it as a disappointment is because it's just been something that's been in the works for so long. We should have seen this movie like 2 years ago. Yeah. And it's just been sitting in the oven. Like, I almost feel a little bit for the Patty Jenkins because this is a movie that she's like, it's done. And you just feel like Warner Brothers couldn't help themselves. It's like, ooh, we have so much time to tweak and change things to try to like fit the perfect 4-quadrant movie. And I just don't think it needs that. And there's this conversation I was having with myself in my head.
Interesting.
Recently.
Tell us
yeah.
Oh,
Well, I mean,
you weren't speaking out loud. Just
it wasn't. No. It
outside.
was in my head. It was an idea that I was just thinking. It was just a concept I was banning about. This idea about like where's the appropriate line for studio meddling, right? Mm-hmm. So, and you'll be shocked, but Star Wars came up in this personal conversation of mine, and Last Jedi specifically does, because you could argue that that's a movie that for a lot of people, they probably would have said, the studio probably should have done some more meddling, because it's basically just an auteur-driven Star Wars movie that's in the middle of a 9-film series, right? It kind of it does, and I do like the movie a lot. It does feel a little disjointed in compared to the rest of the trilogy. Well, that trilogy specifically, but the saga as a whole. But they just let him make the movie he wanted. He's like, okay, just do whatever you want, basically, right? And we got a really good movie out of it. But you could argue that it didn't. There was some backlash that I think we're still dealing with now because of that. There was no one to say, no, I think that's a bad idea. This, by the way, is something that happened at with the prequels as well with George Lucas. So with something like this, it's like where do you just let Patty Jenkins make the movie she wants to make? And I think you'd end up with a better movie, like a more consistent film, right? But maybe it wouldn't fit into the vision of what DC wants for their movies as well. But like, where do you draw the line? I don't know. I don't know.
All we know is that pretty soon after the release, they basically deemed it a success, whatever that means in terms of HBO or whatever, theater money. But
we have no idea. That's another thing that's really frustrating.
They said that Gal Gadot and Patty Jenkins are coming back for the third movie. Mm-hmm. So just those two names, right? So to me, it seems like they kind of know what the deal was with 84 and who had the most creative control or whatever in terms of the writing and whatnot. And then this time might be shifting that, I would imagine, to do something Patty Jenkins really wants to do.
Hopefully.
On her own.
It just, we don't know, and that's the problem. Is it's like there's these conflicting kind of stories we always get. It's the, hey, we're gonna let them. We've hired this great director and let them make them a movie they want. But then in the back, like in the scenes behind the scenes, we don't ever see. There's a lot of producers and executive producers saying, maybe we should do this or maybe we should do that differently.
Yeah. Well, this it's that's you talk about Justice League. That's the representative of that, right? We're gonna see the verses in that scenario, right? The studio meddling versus the auteur-driven, like just a take,
right? And
what is this person's take without us, trying to pick it apart and add things that we want. And I think we're going to see that what comes out is going to be better than the meddling part. Sure,
and what'll be interesting into this kind of concept that I've been trying to understand or wrap my head around is like, will that make it? We'll have that, if all things had been equal and we had gotten the auteur-driven version of Justice League that we want, that, Zack Snyder wanted, right? Would that have fit into, a Justice League universe or, film universe in a way that would have fit and worked well? We don't know, right? And maybe there is a requirement of like, hey, maybe some of these people do need to be reined in a little bit so that this kind of fits a part of a larger whole. But it's just so hard to know from the outside. It's just so hard, and I don't know. But anyway, so that's Wonder Woman. Dan, what's your number 3 movie of the year?
So my list, basically everything on my list, other than the video games, is stuff that I've like experienced within the past couple of weeks, like around the holiday season. So it's technically 2020.
There's some recency bias there, maybe.
There's going to be recency bias, absolutely. But this year wasn't a great year. We've already discussed the
Right.
why. Not a lot of new movies, and not a lot of excitement for movies, and not something that I've wanted to spend a lot of time thinking about. That being said, these ones I'm very very happy with, and I strongly suggest you watch them.
I don't really like movies this year, but if I had to watch a movie, these are the ones I'd watch.
Exactly.
Is that what you're saying?
Well, that's what did happen. These are
Right.
the ones I did watch. So Lovebirds, The Lovebirds, it's a Netflix original, is my number 3. It's starring Kumail Nanjiani and Issa Rae, and it's directed by Michael Showalter, who also directed The Big Sick, also starring Kumail Nanjiani. I think they're a good combination. It's one of these. It's like, I think it's technically a rom-com, just probably just a plain comedy, more accurately, about a couple. The two of them, they have great chemistry together, and they're kind of, the movie starts with them driving around and kind of just discussing their relationship and realizing that they've decided to break up within that conversation. And then something happens within the movie that sends them on this adventure where they've essentially decided to break up, but because they are so good together, they end up, essentially solving a mystery or working together to solve a mystery. It sounds a little cliche when you put it like that, but it comes down to the performance of the two characters and the chemistry that they have together. I highly recommend it. Probably be a great date movie.
Right.
Being that it is kind of romantic comedy-ish, but still has enough of a story that it's not just a pure.
Wait! You tell me this movie that's
called The Lovebirds.
About people breaking up, you think is a great date movie?
Yeah, I know, it's crazy.
That is crazy. That does seem crazy. Okay, cool. All right, so my number 3 is Dolomite Is My Name, which is a movie from 2019, and it was nominated. It was in some of the awards conversation last year around the Oscars and the Golden Globes and stuff. And for my money, it's just pure entertainment in some of the best way, I think. It's this exploration of it's I guess it's a period piece as well, right? And that they really capture the time and the setting of the 1970s, and it takes this kind of stylized approach to everything. Everything feels a little bit heightened, right? But I think it's all because of what Eddie Murphy is bringing to this role, and it's based on a true story, and he's got so much charisma. We already know that Eddie Murphy has a lot of charisma, but this character that he's playing, who is also playing a character, so it's kind of a little bit three-dimensional, is so fun to watch. That you just can't help but root for this person who's basically it's got a little bit of the movie Soul, Pixar's Soul in it, a little bit, which is that this person who's got a dream, they want to do something with their life, they feel like they know what that's supposed to be, right? But they've never experienced success in that area, right? And they get this sliver of success. They take this one piece of success that they do get. And they take it and they expand on it and they build on it into something that's really exciting for that character. And sometimes it maybe seems a little bit outside their reach, a little outside their grasp, but because they believe in it so much, you believe in it so much, and it's just exciting to see them succeed. And I think it's just so much fun, like I said, just to watch. And this is something every year we talk about. The word fun is thrown around a lot when we're talking about our top movies, I think. Sure. Or top film, top things.
It's definitely something you want out of a movie experience,
right?
You want to enjoy it,
right? And great examples. I just watched Chernobyl, and I think that's a great series, HBO miniseries.
But fun wouldn't be a good word.
I would never describe it as fun. I would not in a million years would I describe that as fun. It was one of those things where it's like I forced myself to watch it because I knew it would be good, and knowing I wouldn't like it, quote unquote, in that same kind of fun way. So this is the complete opposite of that, in my opinion. It's great acting, it's great setting, and Eddie Murphy hasn't been that busy in the last several years, and it's just really nice to see him kind of chewing scenery again. So that's my number 3. Has anyone else seen Dolomite?
No.
You're on your own on that.
Recommend it. Highly recommend it.
Might have to.
Okay, so Jeremy, we're back to you. Your number 2 pick for the year 2020.
I went with Borat.
Borat. This Borat 2, I presume.
Yeah, Borat 2.
Like the original Borat. Yeah, interesting choice.
Yeah, I was laughing pretty much from beginning to end. I just think his humor is so clever, and I love how they make fun of real people and kind of trick them and whatnot with having these crazy performances just with these actors, right? Just thrown in there, playing a role, and pretty timely too with the
election,
presidential election. So yeah, it was just really cool to see Borat on the screen again and just what he was up to, and I just thought it was super clever how he tied it in with everything going on now.
It's crazy how Sacha Baron Cohen was able to make this movie after the first one, when Borat became such a
the cat's out of the bag. Everybody knows who Borat is. People quote him all the time. Back then, they quoted him all the time.
So they added this like female character to the movie, right? And apparently she is like really, really good. Is that?
Yeah, I think yeah, she's probably she sells it for sure. She's one of the best parts of the movie.
Dan, have you seen it? No, I haven't seen it either. I've heard good things.
That type of humor, I think, is what makes me uncomfortable.
Are you referencing why I can't watch The Office?
Julian doesn't like The Office.
I can't watch it.
It's similar, but this is on a whole other level.
I just started watching The Office. I'm about 8 episodes.
First time?
Yeah.
Oh, we know what's going to be on your 2021 list.
No, the rules for this year, unless everything's the same next year, are out the window.
I was thinking, though, I was like, I knew Dan watched it, but I was like, Julian's got to find this funny. But
I hate it. Jeremy.
It's so uncomfortable that you can't.
I can't do it. My skin starts to crawl. I want to tear my own skin out of my body and hide under it.
I laugh every time they nail it. It's so good.
No, but like hide under my eyes with my own skin. It's really gross.
You're already hiding under your skin.
I just hate it. Jeremy, I know everyone says you would think it's so funny. I can't do it. I just can't do it.
It's fine.
I don't want to rehash this.
We'll have to talk about this another time.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else you want to say about Borat 2? Or what's the full name? Should figure that out. It's got some crazy long name.
I just think it's a good watch. It's not super long. It's refreshing. It's cool. You get to see a lot of real people just kind of fall for it, and it's just so funny seeing these people just not know what's going on, and like it represents a lot of different types of people that like you might know.
It seems like it'd be just like pure Schadenfreude. Like that's like the whole purpose of it. And by the way, it's called Borat Subsequent Movie Film, and movie film is one word, which is very funny to me. And like, I hadn't seen the first one. Do you think you need to watch the first one to see the second one, Jeremy? In your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, what's the years in between? Isn't it something like 14 years or something?
I feel like it's pretty long. Yeah.
So there's I recognized a few characters that might have popped up or they referenced. But I think a lot of those things will go over people's heads, so I think it definitely helps. But I don't think it's necessary because it's so about the election and like those real people in power, and just what they've kind of created with their followings and stuff. So
it feels like the longer you wait to watch this movie, the less relevant it would feel.
That's certainly true. It's all about current events, right. But I think without having seen either movie, as long as you understand what the character is, you can watch either. Right. Like it's not like there's a lot of you don't need an origin story for Borat. You just know that this is what Borat is.
I think you watch it now, especially with the events that just transpired. I think it makes it even better. So
yeah, oh
yeah. Better being in like also relative.
more incisive, probably more depressing when you think about it that way. The events that just happened recently are I feel like too recent, and I don't know if this is the setting to dive into that anyway. Certainly not. It's
so
also
certainly
not
nobody
within our purview on this podcast.
No, it's not. So we'll just admit that it has happened, and it's not the time to talk about it yet.
We'll start a different podcast for that.
Right. Okay, Dan, you're number 2.
Hotel Artemis.
What is that? What Find a movie we've seen.
You guys,
Why?
Hotel Artemis, starring Sterling K. Brown and Jodie Foster.
Okay, good. Yeah.
I think you guys will both like this movie. Do you remember? I know Jeremy, you do. Julian, I'm not sure if you watched it or not. Smoking Aces.
I love that movie.
Yeah. So this, in my mind, is a spiritual successor. It's like a similar style movie where like, it takes place in a sort of like semi-dystopian
2028.
It's like
apparently.
half futuristic cyberpunk world, but like it's still recognizable enough.
Right.
At this place, it's not actually a hotel. It's like it's sort of a hospital for the city's gangsters, essentially.
Mm-hmm. A 13-story members-only hospital for criminals.
There you go.
Right.
So the agreement is no weapons, no violence towards anybody in the hospital, and she'll help you.
Have you seen any of the John Wick movies?
No, I haven't.
It's that,
What?
what you're describing
What
to
are
me
you
sounds
doing?
very
It's
similar
fine.
to this. Anyway, just
I haven't. I'm planning one day to just do like all three in
Right.
a row, but
I don't know if that's the proper way to do it.
Is that not?
This
I
might
think
be too
you
much
should-
violence.
I think you should space it out over a full year.
Well, I don't know if that's necessary.
Why not?
Once
Make it
you
a
know
part of
what
2021, man. Like you see the first one right away, and then
I'm gonna watch all
second
three,
one
and then
in
I'm
the
gonna
middle
buy
of
a
the
gun.
year. Parabellum in December.
That's crazy that you remember what that I forgot the word parabellum. just know them as John Wick 1, 2, and 3. I think if you like, I think it sounds to me that based off of what you've just told us and the Smoking Aces thing, that you would really like John Wick, and I think
sure I would,
I feel
yeah.
like you need to watch it. But absolutely, tell us more
I'm
about
sure I would
Hotel
love
Artemis.
John Wick. Hotel Artemis is different than John Wick. I haven't seen John Wick.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But it's the same idea as Smoking Aces, where it kind of centralizes some of the city's sort of like the top gangsters, the top killers.
Right.
You know, it's like a perfect recipe for an action movie, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And then
So does it
shit
take
hits the fan.
place? It's always inside the hotel.
It's inside the hotel. So the idea is that
movie.
it's in Los Angeles, and there's like these riots. Basically, it seems like nightly or weekly, like these constant riots of people demanding water. I guess there's a water shortage of some sort.
Oh,
So it takes place on
2020.
one
Los
of these
Angeles
nights.
sounds about right. Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. So it takes place on one of these nights where there is essentially a giant riot. Everyone, it's like, curfews, all that kind of stuff, and all these gangsters in the same place at the same time.
Okay. So is there a lot of world building in this, or is it like
No,
it's mostly
no.
just like it's like Dread 3D? You just go in there and
very
you,
similar
yeah.
to that. It's
Okay.
it's just about that night itself and a bunch of crazy shit happening to these characters on that
Yeah.
night, and they're all hyper stylized characters that are
Right.
really interesting and cool. Like the French lady assassin is especially cool. although
Right.
they screw up. At one point she no spoiler, but at one point she has a bomb planted and she's doing the countdown and she's speaking out loud in French and she screws up the countdown.
How do you mess
point,
up? How do you mess
I'm
that
gonna
up?
rewatch it because I'm not certain, because I'm pretty sure at one point she uses the term 34,
Right.
which
That's not right.
30,
Yeah.
14, but
right.
it would actually be 44. Like some French decimal group or
right.
whatever, 80 and 90, it would be 80, which is 420, and 90 is 90, which is
Right.
420, 10. So it's a weird language like that. But 40 doesn't
Well,
work.
70
that way.
also is the same way too.
70 is the same way.
But 40's not.
40's not. So she screws it up. She 32, and I'm like, wait, no, I know that's not true.
That's funny.
Other than that, very fun movie though.
Okay, cool. Other than this very major problem that I had with this movie, it's great. Just kidding, it's minor. Okay, cool. I'm gonna have to. Where is it? Where can you watch that?
I watched it on Amazon.
Okay, I'm gonna try to track that
Okay.
down.
Maybe Netflix. One of the two. They're the same to me.
Okay, fair enough.
It's streaming, guys.
Okay, so my number 2 movie of the year 2020 is a movie from 2017. Okay, it's a Pixar movie. Let me start over. My number 2 movie of the year 2020 is a Pixar movie. Okay, about a character who dies and goes into
sort of afterlife?
the afterlife.
Wow.
Right? Okay, but they can't. But it was all a mistake, right? It wasn't supposed to happen that way, and they have to go on a mission to resolve the issue in the afterlife, while at the same time dealing with people in the land of the living. And I'm talking about the movie Coco from 2017, and not Soul. I do like Soul. I think the music is great. We're talking just Pixar stuff. I think the music in Soul is great. I really do enjoy that movie. But if we're talking about if you open the gates and you say, "Hey, Julian, pick any Pixar movie you've seen this year that's new to you," it's going to be Coco over Soul every time. And Coco is a little bit, I think, more focused of a story. It deals with the Dias de Muertos, which is like the Mexican Day of the Dead, and it's visually stunning. Like I watched it on like the HDR on the fancy TV, and it's so pretty. These pastel colors, the music, this kind of Spanish guitar that's like threaded throughout the whole thing, and kind of almost even and kind of important to the story itself. It feels so good to watch. Like it just. There's some questions you're like, well, there's some. You start wondering about a couple things, just like you would with any kind of fantasy setting like this. You're like, well, does that really make sense? But they're so small and minor that it doesn't really matter. It's like this idea, like, hey, if you die when you're 80, you end up in the Day of the Dead, and you end up having this 80-year-old body for eternity, and it's like that kind of sucks, right? But like, as long as you can look past that stuff, I think it is one of Pixar's best movies. I think it's really underrated. I think in terms of Pixar's best.
I don't know about underrated. I think everybody loves Coco. I haven't seen it myself.
I think not enough people have seen it. That's part of the problem.
I was under the impression it was very highly rated.
It's very good. It is very, very good. I mean, underrated is a really weird word. I don't think enough people have seen it. I think in terms of Pixar movies, it's amazing, and I just highly recommend it. So if you had to pick only one afterlife themed Pixar movie to watch this year, I'd recommend Coco, and they're both obviously available on Disney Plus. Jeremy, have you seen Coco?
I think I've seen a short amount of it, like maybe 30-40 minutes.
And that didn't grip you enough to keep watching?
No, I remember it being like pretty good looking. Like when you say visually stunning, like I remember that coming across, and also just the story of it. Like it seemed like it was setting up for like tears, like.
Oh yeah,
towards the end,
I for sure cried. I mean, there's no denying it, whatsoever. Okay, so Jeremy, we're back to you. Your number one movie of the year 2020.
I'm gonna have to go with Tenet.
Tenet, interesting. Yeah. That's crazy.
Which is also, it's like when the theaters were open, I went to go see it there too. So it's that's the only movie I literally saw in theaters.
Yeah. That's not true, Jeremy. You saw 1917 in theaters this year.
Did it? Was it this year?
That was this year. It came out January 10th.
Or 2020. It was January.
Yep.
Maybe I saw an early screener.
No, you didn't.
How do you know?
No, you didn't. Because you talked about it after seeing it in the theaters. I don't know. Maybe you saw it.
I think I saw it in December.
All right.
But. Or I guess since the pandemic has kind of taken a hold of the world.
It's warped time, so I understand that. Yeah.
And I share the complaints of the film that most people have, but I still think it's such an interesting story, and I love the acting.
You think it's wait. You think it's an interesting story?
It's got to be. An interesting
it's
story.
The story's not. The story's the least interesting part of the movie.
Like sci-fi, right? Like
sure.
What this new thing that we would never even imagine, kind of being like an FBI or CIA or something of that nature, that can control this mechanism is interesting to me for sure, and the story works in a way to where it kind of touches on all those possibilities, or it confuses the timeline a lot, but you still get what's going on. Like you still get like all the beats if you're still kind of like unaware of exactly how things work. Because I think it could be way worse. Like,
I mean, I don't know if that's a great like.
No, in terms of what
this
people
movie could have been way worse.
In terms of what people say, how they have no idea,
right?
Like, absolutely zero grasp on what's going on. I think that's
some hyperbole.
Common I think that's the common though, like kind of shared narrative that isn't necessarily true, but just represents it. But yeah,
to me, it's a movie I also saw in theaters, and everyone here was excited. Dan, I think you're the only one who hasn't seen it.
I haven't seen it yet, but I really have to. I think
it's on 4K Blu-ray now. You really have no excuse.
Oh, that's a good way to watch it.
Right, and it's Nolan unhinged. it's like him. It's just like pure Nolan id. I feel like, and for better and for worse. Like it's gorgeous, right? It's so pretty. Like they're like this complex sci-fi idea is like, I'd say well thought out, but very complex, which makes it hard to convey the full scope in like a movie. And it is a long movie, but it's like there's a lot of just like again, it's very similar to, in my opinion, what's the dream movie? His dream movie about dreams. Inception. It's very similar to Inception, where there's like a lot of just in dialogue for the sake of explaining stuff over and over again.
I'm all about that. As long as it's as
but it moves,
as long as you
but
can
it
follow
moves.
as long as
I think it
as
moves.
well as with Inception, I'm on board.
Yeah, I think it moves quick though, quicker than Inception.
That's
and
true.
I also want to shout out the music by Ludwig, right? Who's pretty hot right now.
He's so hot right now.
He's just so good. Like with Star Wars, The Mandalorian, right? In this movie, it's well known for his work on Community. It does a lot of heavy lifting, in my opinion. I don't think it's getting enough credit. Like it makes your heart race, just the music alone, not just the visuals, right? But then when you tie the visuals together, loud, trying to figure out what's going on in the story, especially during the action sequences, which again it's cool that it's all very practical and in that classic real fashion, right? Not this overblown CG typical blockbuster, which I really like.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of, it comes back to this kind of conversation I've been having with myself again, which is this idea of like how much do you just let a director just do what they want to do versus like where does someone need to be reined in? And I feel like this is an example of like,
reined into what though?
Well, it's like, it's just more accessible.
You must be just talking about like the minor things though, right? Like in terms of the dialogue, hearing. Like,
well, I mean, there's obviously the audio mix where it's again it's baffling to me that he chose to set this like very important scene about, and that like where they talk about very important things.
Masks.
In like they're wearing masks and they're talking over the radio, but you still can't hear them. It's like that makes no sense to me. Like I just
you almost could have used what's it called? When words show up.
The subtitles?
Yeah.
When words show up. Yeah. Yeah, it's like, I forgot the word exposition and you forgot the word subtitles.
But I was also thinking about that because we visit that scenario kind of again, right?
Right.
In terms of what Tenet represents, right? Being backwards and forwards or whatever. And I think it's on purpose to confuse you. You know what I mean? Because nobody has any idea what's going on.
That's true. It does look visually. It's very visually interesting, right? Like what's happening on screen is cool.
He's thrust into the situation. You don't hear anything because of the mask, but you know what point 2 is, and then point 3. Like you get those things. I think you get enough of those things to where you can make it through to where, in terms of what people are saying, how they can, they just don't know what's going on at all. Like for me, I was able to just keep moving with it.
I agree. I think I completely agree. As like a roller coaster ride, it's very entertaining. As like a well-structured movie, I think it's got a lot of problems. For even down to the characters and how they're represented. They're paper thin.
Yeah, and it makes your brain like work to really try to.
Yeah, I just feel like, is that a good thing? Like it's like you're constantly like, how does this work?
It can be fun. For me, it was fun, and it was just really good escapism for me, especially seeing it in the theater after a while.
There is nothing like seeing a Christopher Nolan movie on an IMAX screen. There's just nothing like it. But that doesn't mean it's the best movie. For me, it doesn't mean it's like, I just think it's just too many problems to just say like it's just super pretty and then that works. There's just too many problems for me. So I understand why you put it number 1 though. That does make sense. Okay, Dan, you're number 1.
I put Sorry to Bother You.
I've been wanting to watch this.
It's phenomenal. I highly recommend you guys watch it. It's again similar to Hotel Artemis. It takes place in this like sort of pseudo cyberpunk, like half reality, like
Right.
like slightly imaginable future, like maybe like 10 years from now things are slightly different but imaginable enough that it's relatable, which makes it scary in that sense. It's about a character who, you know, the movie starts out with him interviewing for a job at some stupid telemarketing firm.
Right. Mm-hmm.
It's that simple. And then the character gets sucked into sort of like corporate greed, and he's doing very well, so he's promoted, and he has to deal with the concept of the people who are now under him having not received any sort of promotion or any sort of financial benefits, blah blah blah. Like, so he has to deal with that, which is fine. Like, that's an interesting enough movie on its own. But I like the trappings of the world that they've created, because it's not our reality. It's just slightly off and weird. But everybody, all the characters in the movie accept it as their reality. So it's almost like an alternate reality movie, but it's so close to ours that it's still relatable. It's a really, really delicate and fine line that they are able to walk. Very impressive. The thing that this movie and The Lovebirds, on my number 3 spot, have in common, actually, both to me offer a very refreshing new perspective on race relations in the United States. Something that I'm not well versed in by any means, but both of them offer like a different way to look at things from perspectives that traditionally have not been heard. So I think it's important to watch these types of movies as well for that alone, if nothing else.
I just heard like it was on a lot of top. Was it 2018 that it came out? I thought it was last year, but but basically whatever year it came out, it was on a lot of top 10 lists. People really, really liked this movie, and it was something that I was like, that's really interesting. It reminds me, not as. I don't know. I don't know. I haven't seen it. It's not fair to say that, but it just seems like it'd be really interesting. So it's been just recently added to Netflix up here in Canada, and I'm gonna watch it. It's on my list. I've added it to my list. Although does that mean anything on Netflix when you add something to your list? I don't know.
It's really cool. So, like, one thing, this isn't a spoiler at all, but one of the things, these are black characters, if that wasn't clear before. I guess I didn't really mention it, but dealing with race relations, that's what's topical in the United States right now. The characters have to do their quote-unquote white voice because they're telemarketers. Right. They have to put their white voice on when they're selling to people. And they just have David Cross and Patton Oswalt do the voices. It's hilarious.
That's good. That's cool. That's like,
perfect.
To me, that's like...
so they voice over them when they're doing it. Oh, that's cool. I like that.
So they have the black characters talking as though they were talking on the phone selling, but they just voice over with David Cross, who has a fairly white-sounding voice.
He's like the most white-sounding person.
And Patton Oswalt's another one.
Right.
There's a few others, but
I'm
a fan of the main actor there, Lakeith Stanfield.
Yeah,
he was in
really cool.
Get Out, I remember, and then I liked him in Uncut Gems.
I haven't seen that.
Yeah, they're all. Yeah, that movie's good too.
And he's in Knives Out too.
He's great.
He's
having a great time.
He's great in this movie. Tessa Thompson, Valkyrie, is the female lead in the movie. Also great.
Okay, so I need this is something, and this is so where. Okay, so here's the question: is
Armie Hammer's playing like a douchebag tech CEO in this movie? And it's perfect.
That's funny because because in Social Network, a movie you haven't seen, Armie Hammer plays the dude who gets bought out of Facebook. He plays technically both twins who get bought out of Facebook.
The Winklevoss twins.
The Winklevosses, exactly. So it's like there's kind of like a full circle thing there. I think that's kind of fun.
Cool.
So okay, the question I think, and Jeremy, I'll come back to you as well for this. What makes you put this at your number 1 spot of the year?
I think again, this year's different. All 3 of these movies are on my list because they were surprising to me. They were refreshing. I wasn't expecting them. I didn't know a lot about them going into it. I didn't have high expectations. So these are movies that I stumbled upon, so to speak. I think that affects my rating absolutely, and that recency bias we discussed earlier. So for me, I can't point to any one thing other than that. Like, the movie itself is great, of course. I can't compare it with a lot of other movies because I didn't watch it in that same context.
That's fair. Jeremy, where do you, for you, what was the tipping point? What made you decide that was the movie? I mean, for you, you mentioned earlier that without putting words in your mouth, that it's like you tried to think of it as just movies that came out in 2020, so that there's a lot less options, obviously. But
I think most of the new experiences probably came through the film club, which I didn't necessarily want to bring those over. Or I just like I said, I just tried to feel out 2020 new stuff.
Right.
And with so much weight on Tenet's shoulders, I still want to represent it there. And then just personally, just having that theater experience and just going along that roller coaster ride, as we kind of described it, it was just my favorite movie experience, right? But if I was to, not have the categories right, I don't think it'd be at the number one spot.
Right.
If we were to blend the three categories.
That's fair. Okay, so for me, my number one movie of 2020, which feels like a cheat a little bit just because of where in 2020 it came out, but technically it fits the bill.
It counts.
Yeah, so my number one movie of 2020 is 1917. And this is I'm like, so I'll just kind of give you guys some idea of my headspace. So I keep a running tally of the movies I watch throughout the year, just so I can look back at it and say, okay, what have I done? And it's a lot of it is for this specific show, so I can kind of go back and think about it. But also so I can go back after I have now 3 years of this, I can go back and look at movies I've seen over the last 3 years, and I think that's kind of a fun kind of like journaling activity you can do. And if I wanted to, I could like do a blurb or something about it. I don't do that, but you could see that there'd be room for that. But anyway, so when it comes to this episode, I go and I open that note in my notes app and I look at it and I think of the movies that what jumps out at me, because I feel like I'm very susceptible to recency bias, where like I kind of forget about some of the movies, and I think it's natural to forget about the movies you first see at the beginning of the year, but like just like, do they really stand out as something that's like really huge and important? And I'm like, most of the time it's like no, and over the years it's like you'll get a lot of the kind of award stuff in December, so you can kind of get those kind of in there at the end of the year, plus the big blockbusters come out over the summer, so it's like everything that comes out in January, February, March, that first quarter of the year often gets forgot about. But 1917, because it won a bunch of awards obviously last year, was a little bit more memorable for me. But when I'm going through this list, it jumped out at me as being like, this is a movie experience that was not only a roller coaster ride in a similar way that Tenet was, but also I think of just a better film. And I don't think about this movie all the time, but when I think about like the future of movies, and we talked about this, Jeremy, we talked about this when this movie came out, is like this idea of doing a film in an entirely one shot, whether it's actually done in one shot or not, doesn't matter. Right. But in choosing to take that on as a challenge is so fascinating, right? It makes not only the movie story itself interesting, but it makes you interested in how the movie's made and like the science of movie making, and it's like that already excites me. And it combines the two things together, and this movie is just so engrossing. It sucks you in. There's a couple like downer moments, but this is kind of and maybe boring moments if you want to put it that way. But it just kind of goes with the territory of having, if you're just like you're going to be with one character all the time, there's going to be some low points, and that's fine.
It's a movie though. It's like it's so different from a regular movie experience that it's hard for me to put it on the same list. Like I remember when it first came out, we were all talking about it, and I do think, Jeremy, that you were the one who said that this is like it's a new type of filmmaking because of the way that it's shot. It's not like any other movie, so it's really difficult to have it on a list like this because it's incomparable towards any other movie.
Yeah, but it just in my opinion, it's like it's still a movie,
of course,
and it makes everybody else's movies look like shit in comparison. It's like obviously that's hyperbole. That's hyperbole, obviously. But like it's like look at all the work that that they did, or that Sam Mendes did to make this work, and then obviously Roger Deakins is cinematographer, well deserved Oscar-winning cinematographer. But like, so there's a great team here behind this.
Sure.
But like, you're right, it is very different, and maybe it's not fair to compare other movies that don't choose to do that. It's like not every movie benefits from this type of filmmaking.
Exactly, and like, ultimately, when you're comparing them, you're not comparing the same things. I think.
I think you still are. Character, story, action, all those things are in here, right? And I think. When you talk about like paper thin characters, I think when talking about Tenet, in a more that movie's obviously much more traditionally shot. This movie, you could say, it has a little bit of an excuse why these characters aren't as explored as they could be, because it's like, how are you going to do? How can you flashbacks or stuff like that?
That's the point. It's more about the visuals than it is about the character.
But I think there's still good character development here, in spite of the fact that they don't have access to those same tools. So I don't know. For me, for my money, for a movie that came out this year, I mean, technically, its initial release is December 4th. it in like small theaters in London.
But
It wasn't.
But at the end of the day, we celebrate
released
this. We celebrate
Yeah.
this movie
Yeah.
with the Oscar celebration of last
right.
year type thing.
Yeah.
Right? It was. I think I picked it for my money to win because, like you mentioned, I was saying like to me, it represents different levels to the like skill set of filmmaking,
Right.
and it just showcases it. It says, okay, you know, we get what you've seen before and how good those things are. You look at films like, I think I remember bringing up what's the movie where they
Dunkirk.
why am I forgetting the name?
It's the only
Where he's
one.
got they
Birdman?
can't get pregnant. No, they can't get pregnant anymore.
Oh, Children of Men.
Children of Men. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So that movie's super ahead of its time and super engrossing. And I was like, well, what if that whole movie was the one shot you know, what they did here? Like it would just up it so much more, in my opinion, because it sucks you in and doesn't let you go. Like you're
Well,
there.
you can't. If you
for
look
good.
away, you can miss anything. It's like
Yeah. You're just there for good, and there's no break to. There's no cuts that someone chose. You know what I mean? Like which you could disagree with when you're watching. Sometimes cuts can be bad, right? Like there's just no cuts. It's just that level of sucking you in. You have to just not cut. You got to be there the whole time. And they found a way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, like, and like we said, like, who cares if they cheat it, right? Like, if they can make it feel like it works.
Because we've already seen this. You know, they sold this movie on that, but they showcased, like, you know, behind the scenes of them, you know, doing it, filming for 19 minutes straight or whatever. Right? They still had sequences that are super long, like longer than anything else.
Yeah,
before.
Yeah. It's just so impressive that it's like, for me, it's like, if I'm gonna, and sure, okay, and just for the record, this is all of our lists are relative, and they're all based on how we perceive it and how we want to build it. For me, it's like, I wanted to incorporate the best movies I saw this year, but also I wanted to not. I didn't want to leave off a movie that actually came out in 2020, right? For me, it just happened that 1917 was the best of those movies that I saw. And, like, you could argue that The Prestige is a better movie, but I'm not going to put that as my number one movie for 2020. You know what I mean?
Yep, makes sense.
So that brings us to our honorable mentions and our disappointments. We already, for Jeremy, again, we already talked about Wonder Woman. That is my disappointment. I could also mention that every movie being delayed out of 2020 is also a major disappointment.
Sure.
So that's kind of my like a little bit of my cheat, but that's the other one. But let's go to honorable mentions first. Dan, do you have any honorable mentions that you want to bring up?
Well, I'd mentioned Days of Thunder.
Nice, good. You know what?
And I will thank you, Jeremy, for this movie.
You're welcome.
This movie, I really expected to hate this movie. It's about racing cars,
and it stars Tom Cruise, and you don't even like Tom Cruise.
I don't dislike Tom Cruise. I'm sort of indifferent towards Tom Cruise, but the movie about racing cars did not seem interesting.
Well, it's not even just racing.
Remember,
it's NASCAR.
Dale doesn't even like racing video games.
I don't.
Right?
I can't stand them.
What do you mean? Yeah, Gran Turismo was like the PS2 game that you showed off.
No, it was the first game that came with the PS2.
That explains so much. To this day, I've always assumed
that's
you
just a
bought
driving
that game.
sim. That game's not exciting.
And I'm pretty sure that game is where this comes from, because it's just a driving sim. You're just driving around in a circle. It's a video game. It's crazy. Anyways, and it's beautiful. But whatever.
People get very excited about it.
What were we talking about?
We were talking about Days of Thunder.
Days of Thunder is a very, very entertaining movie. It's like a perfect 90s/80s movie. I think it was 90s, early 90s. Perfect Tom Cruise in his prime, honestly, and just a very exciting, fun movie to watch. It's not, going to be an Oscar winner by any means, but it's just a very enjoyable movie-going experience. Thank
1990,
you,
so it really just does, walk the line of that. Like, it's just so stylized, and for me, like, if Tom Cruise is so charismatic in this movie, it's like you can't not root for him,
It makes me interested in NASCAR, which I wasn't before, and it makes me. It's just
with
those characters.
The pit stop and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Team, funding a team, right?
Just everything about it is. I think it captures.
We
the
compared
essence.
it to Ford versus Ferrari. I think when we first watched it, because that was like timely.
Makes sense.
And Ford versus Ferrari in comparison is
Different movies.
dog shit compared to fucking Days of Thunder. In my
And
just
that's why
humble opinion.
that's why a good director too, and has Christian Bale and Matt Damon in it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, it's weird.
This is a movie, Days of Thunder, directed by Tony Scott. Tony Scott, for my money, is one of the best directors that was like gone before his time. He's so good, consistently good, and like Ridley Scott, his brother, you could argue kind of like fell into that trap that Lucas fell into, where he's like went back and explored his stuff too much, re-explored it, right? And whatever, you can make an argument there, but. And, Tony Scott never had that opportunity. Like, he's like, he passed long before he had the opportunity to make a Days of Thunder 2, for instance, But, like, his movies...
Which will be championing from now on.
I want a Days of Thunder 2, and I want it to be directed by whoever... If Top Gun 2 is good, I want them to do it. And it just... His movies are just like... They find a way to be purely entertaining, but still be entirely surface level. Like, it's like they're not that deep, and that's okay, but they're just deep enough to be like super fascinating, that you want to know more. They're visually stunning. Like, I'm just thinking.
I also think it's from a time when movies were just movies. Like, people weren't as critical about movies back then.
Maybe.
Like this whole like cottage industry.
I was 1 year,
critics.
not even when this movie came out.
Yeah, like, and even like obviously podcasts weren't a thing, but like people didn't take movies as seriously as some of us do, I guess now.
The Roger Eberts of the world probably
well,
did.
Exactly, but it was limited to that, right? So the movie like this, which is very superficial, ultimately can be successful because it's just anybody can pick it up and enjoy it.
Transformers movies are still super successful, and they're the most superficial. You know what I mean? Like, so I don't know if that's changed that much.
I know. I think success is defined differently now.
Sure. I mean, that's fair. I mean, they still make money, I guess, is the other way to put it. Yeah. Great pick, though, Jen, as a honorable mention. Surprised you didn't put it in your top 3, to be honest. It's really...
Didn't make the top 3.
But it would be number 4. Like, if you really think of it, it'd probably be number 4, right?
It may be 4 or 5. I don't know.
Right. Okay. Do you have any other honorable mentions you want to mention?
I did put one other. It's a bit of a... There should be an asterisk beside it because I watched it in 2021. It's not a 2020 thing. It's on Amazon Prime. It's called Oats Studio. Oats as in oats, like from the ground.
Right.
Oats Studio Volume 1. It's Neil Blomkamp, who did District 13 and Elysium, and Chappie.
Yes, he's you say them all in like the same breath, like they're all of equal like quality, but like
that's what he's known for.
I know. Yeah. Chappie is not like I
haven't seen Chappie, but either way, he's the director. That's what he's known for.
Yep, absolutely.
This is his film studio. Is his Oats Studio based in BC. And it's a movie on Amazon Prime. Yeah, it is.
Yeah, interesting.
But it's really a series of shorts. So there's like a bunch of different shorts that are all written by Neil Blomkamp and somebody else, and then he directs them.
Cool.
Really interesting concept, but it's presented in the form of a movie. So it's sort of like there's like 3 longer shorts and like maybe 5 mini shorts, and in between there's like these fake infomercials. It's really diverse in terms of what's being presented to you.
Weird.
So it's all the way from like sci-fi to the
it's like more like a TV show almost
it's not,
or like sitting down and watching TV for 3 hours.
No, because they're all separate. It's all completely separate things.
But like so is every episode of a TV show in like in the sense that like if you watch CBS on a Monday night, right, you're gonna get like CSI and then the blah 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 and then a different thing. You're gonna get like different things, but interstitched with the commercials in between. But like, if you took a chunk of TV for 3 hours and put it together, would that be like that or no?
I know you're saying that it's not quite like that.
Okay.
I think maybe it could be like that if they expanded on it, but that's not the way it's presented in this format. It's more about the shorts than it is about the commercials.
Okay, fair enough.
But just some really fascinating sci-fi shorts.
This is like Daniel's like it's like his crack.
I would say there's a lot of gore. There's a lot of blood. I wouldn't say that it's torture porn or anything like that, but it is coming close. But really interesting sci-fi like alien invasion stories. So if you're into any of that kind of stuff, and the infomercials are just pure hilarious.
So Dan, have you seen none of those like Dust shorts
I watch
on
Dust
YouTube?
all the time. I love Dust.
There's a billion of them. Would you say they're in that vein?
Absolutely, they're in the same vein. Slightly higher production value, obviously.
I feel like the production value in the Dust stuff is pretty good.
It's hit and miss. Most of them they're pretty good and they're getting better. But this is Neil Blomkamp. He's
right. Yeah, obviously he has access to more money.
It's on a different level in terms of that. So like the very first short is very reminiscent of District 13 in terms of the aliens. They have that sort of level of fidelity.
District 12? Is it District?
Is it 12?
I feel like it's District 12.
Yeah, you know what I mean.
It
That's
could
not
be
important.
9. It could be
District 9.
Is
It might be
9?
District
It
9.
might 9. One of them is from Hunger Games.
It might be 9. It might be 9. You know what? Who's to say? Who's to say?
I'm not talking about
it's
District.
9.
Exactly.
I'm not talking about District 16. I'm talking about this movie, O Studio Volume 1.
District 9 came out in 2009.
Do you think, Dan? Here's a question. Here's a question. Do you think they could have come up with a better name for their movie?
Then Oat Studio Volume 1?
you think that they could have used a better name than their
Well,
template name?
100%.
Yeah.
It's clearly a compilation of shorts.
Right,
They were
right.
created at different times. And what's exciting to me about this is that implies there's going to be a Volume 2.
Well, the implication, if you put Volume 1, it implies a Volume 2.
Right.
It does. Okay. I'll have to check that out, though.
And I didn't put anything for disappointments in any of the
Nothing was
categories.
disappointing to you.
A lot of things
Just
are
the year
disappointing.
2020?
It's
Just the year.
Dan's keeping it positive, okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Trying to.
Okay. Because he
And
was
I got
giving me
no
shit about
honorable
keeping it
mentions.
positive.
I'm keeping this party
Good, yeah.
rolling.
Okay. Let's
go.
keep the party rolling. No disappointments, no honorable mentions.
Yeah,
I think.
doing this for yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Let's get into the TV side. This episode's always long, guys. We always know that.
Doesn't have to be.
But do we feel like we've gone too deep on
No,
anything? I don't know.
We're good.
I don't know. I think we're maintaining a solid pace.
Chugging along.
Pacing is. We might need a second bottle of wine though. Okay. So we're going to TV now. There's been the one thing that's interesting about television, I think, for this year is that most of the TV stuff that came out was done and dusted and was like set and scheduled for this year, right? The production was not affected by COVID.
Right.
It was all just pre-COVID done, and it's going to come out because it was going to come to TV anyway and streaming primarily, so it doesn't really matter, right? We're going to see, I think we're going to see as a group more delays, longer stretches between seasons next year and the year after, because that's going to be where the COVID effect is really you're going to see on television. So in a stark difference to movies where, the movies might have been done, but there was nowhere to see them, and they moved them out of 2020 so that they can have their theatrical releases. Television doesn't have that problem. This was how it was supposed to happen. These television shows came out when and how they were intended. So I think that's important to note. And I mentioned at the beginning, it's like this line between movies and television is blurry, and it's getting more blurry all the time. But I think largely, we can just kind of sense and feel what is a TV show and what's a movie. And I don't think we have anything really on our lists that kind of try to defy that. There are some things every once in a while, like there's the stuff that last year I'm trying to think of the O.J. Simpson stuff was like pitched as this is like a 6-hour movie, but it was a 6-hour miniseries.
Sure.
This isn't. I don't think anything we have here is really trying to defy that distinction. So. I think this is where we're going to have a lot of our better discussions. There's a lot of really good stuff to talk about, in my opinion. So, Jeremy,
I'm ready.
We go to you again to start because I have no idea what you're going to talk about. What's your number 3 television show of the year 2020?
Tiger King.
Crazy! Are you insane?
No,
that's
not at all.
so.
The people
okay.
the people in the show are insane.
That's true.
Okay. Yeah.
We can all agree there.
Mm-hmm. For sure. 100%. Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen Tiger King yet, Jeremy.
You need to watch it.
It's not my, it's not my kind of thing.
I'm never going to watch it.
Pitch me on it. Please pitch me on it.
You'll it's just so crazy. It's so it's so unbelievable, but it's true. It's everything that you're seeing has happened, and there's been repercussions and deaths.
Excuse
lawsuits.
me? You're just going to throw that in?
And
there's repercussions, some of which are deaths.
It's like these average Americans who
are they average? I don't know if they're average.
Well, I mean,
you're the one who's seen it. You're right.
Okay,
you're right.
Like in terms of they lived the American dream and they've amassed some money to start up
to own tigers if they wanted to.
Yeah, whatever, right? And
Yeah.
and they just get bigger and bigger and bigger, and then you learn the statistics of how many tigers exist in the world
in the wild,
and in the wild. Well, in the wild, And that's the statistic, is that there's more in captivity, especially in the United States. Like, this Tiger King thing isn't just a one-off, some random dude. There's a bunch of them, and they are wild and crazy. And this guy in particular, you couldn't make up a crazier individual. He's into so many things. He's trying to be an entrepreneur in all avenues. Singer, you know what I mean? Product selling.
Singer?
Yes, but he's not even him.
Okay.
I think he probably has hundreds, not hundreds, like maybe just under 100 CDs, albums, and he's not even the guy singing. He pays someone to sing for him. There's music videos. It's all being dubbed. And I didn't know that until like halfway through the season.
That's crazy. You're right. That is crazy. Jeremy, you know what? You're right.
He is so far over his head. And it boggles the mind, because he's essentially, a millionaire. Mm-hmm. And the trouble that they get themselves into, the things that they're doing, the games that they play to ruin the other Tiger King's like kingdom.
Whoa. There's a whole Tiger King v Tiger King situation going on.
Yeah, like the main guy, he is currently in jail.
Yeah, the one lady had her ex-husband eaten by a tiger.
Well, no, I knew that, but
that's the narrative that they try to sell, right? Obviously, she denies that and hasn't been proven of that. But.
Hard to prove. I feel like that would be hard to prove.
Evidence is
it's to me
digested.
It was just so wild, so entertaining. I couldn't wait to just watch, an episode or two after work. Yeah. And I just couldn't get enough of it. I just couldn't. Every episode, you're like, what? Like, he's marrying another, like the three of them are getting married. Him and his, like, the three dudes are getting married right now. They're all wearing pink suits. This is happening. Like, this is legal. It's just insane. Like, every episode, the next one, you're like, what? Like, no, this has to be made, and it's not. So it's so entertaining.
It's like, so here's a question for you, Jeremy.
Shoot.
In light of the most recent events in the United States, is it still as crazy? Like, is it like, does it feel like it's like too self-indulgent now in light of that? Or like, how do you square that circle? I feel like, you know what I mean?
I mean, I don't know if I thought about it in the same comparison as we were doing before.
When you watch it, you couldn't have, right?
But, well, even just thinking about it, like, I don't think there's it showcases how crazy some Americans can be, for sure. Like, just there's so many of them, they're just a lot of weird people. Like, they're just messed up.
There's a lot of weird people. That's true everywhere.
I don't know how else to say it. It's just, and this show showcases a lot of them amassing a following and a business, and it's just, they're just not fit to run these things that they're doing and the decisions they make, and it's just wildly entertaining to see it unfold.
All right, well, I don't know what will take me to watch this show. I know it was like, it overtook like popular culture for the week it was important, but I it feels like it would just make me angry, and I don't think I want.
Okay, but that. the thing is that you really get to learn the characters, and especially Tiger King himself. And it's a weird thing where he comes off very charismatic, and you almost feel for him in his situation, even though of like the weird shit he's done. He's so interesting. Like, it's weird. Like, it's not just a bunch of like flashy, weird people just doing whatever. Like, you get into like how these people feel and like emote and stuff, and like the reasons why they do things.
I mean, it seems like, from my perspective, it's like there's a lot of interesting people in the world, and it's like, I don't know if I want to.
Why pay attention to these people?
Yeah, because like everyone is interesting if you really explore them, right? So I don't know. It's tough. Dan, what do you think?
Well, it's not for me. I know that. I know. I agree. Like, it would make me frustrated. I can understand, Jeremy. I could understand it being interesting. Absolutely. Like, these people are fascinating because I can't imagine their perspective. I can't imagine their lives whatsoever. So that's fascinating to me. I guess what I don't like about it is more the headspace that I would be in when I'm watching it. I get the impression that people when it came out, when people were talking to me about it, were watching it as a source of entertainment. When we're talking about real people, and like even earlier, like you mentioned that they're characters, and that's true in this case. They're not actors; they're characters. They're people, but they're still characters in the story.
That's true in documentaries too. They're just
larger than life characters that are all mixing it up, and it's super like unique situation over.
I just have a hard time with that line of like crossing the line between because they are somewhere in the world real people that are have real emotions and all that kind of stuff. I have a hard time crossing that line personally. But
it feels a lot like reality television to me, and that's always turned me off. It's like I understand how it's entertaining, but it's like I feel like I can get entertainment elsewhere in a less kind of like exploitive way. Yeah.
Exploitative.
Yeah. What Dan said. Okay, Dan, your number 3 television show of 2020.
Number 3, and I think this list was tough for me too. As much as you would say that TV wasn't affected by COVID, I think in terms of production slate, maybe it wasn't, but in terms of my consumption of it, I think it was. And I just had little interest. But Lovecraft Country is my number 3 spot.
HBO, nice.
I didn't watch it when it first came out. I watched it late. I had to catch up. I think it's a little goofy at points, but this show, when it's good, it's really good. And that's what I appreciated of it. Like when it is really good, it is near the same level as Lovecraft actual books in terms of like exploring the mythos and this crazy cosmic horror sort of world. It doesn't quite reach those peaks, but it gets close. I think it gets caught up in the weeds of like weird action adventure stuff. At one point, all the characters turn into like karate heroes. But if you take that stuff out of it, the cosmic horror elements and the mystery element are very powerful. I think it's a great show. And another show that actually, I didn't realize this was a theme, but another show that touches directly on race relations.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think in a subtle way, in a good way. Yeah,
in a subtle way, but without holding back at the same time.
Yeah, no. It's not holding. It's not pulling
shining
punches.
the light on things that were traditionally not discussed. So I think it has value in that sense, if nothing else. But it's also just a great TV show.
So the Lovecraft Country for me is my disappointment for television for this year because I was really excited for the show.
Racist.
And the reason for it is because it's too inconsistent for me. Like it's so all over the place. I think the first episode is so gripping. It's so interesting. It sets up this fascinating mystery that is answered in the first episode, and you're like mostly answered in the first episode. And you're like, man, that's strange that they did it that way, but that means who knows what's going to happen for the rest of the season. But it ultimately just comes back to the same stuff. And I don't think the villains are also very compelling. I think they're pretty boring as villains. And the show, I think, it does a great job exploring the race relations stuff, and it doesn't do it in a heavy-handed way. And it's kind of like I'd say it's like A2 or A1 plot point. Like the plot is this Lovecraft-esque stuff, and then the race relations is like key to that story. But the actual like mystery itself, I don't think is as compelling as it could be, and it's too all over the place. There's one episode that's like particularly insane from a sci-fi perspective. That it's very cool, but like as a larger narrative and cohesive whole, it really struggles to fit. And I think it's tough. For me, it's not. It doesn't reach the levels of the first episode, and that's a shame for me.
I think part of that, just to defend the show a little bit, part of that is that you're meant to be experiencing this from the character's perspective, and it's all new to them as well.
Right.
Like they're as confused as the audience is because this is completely unprecedented. Like you're talking about
magic,
essentially magic, right? Other dimensions, things that nobody has any sort of experience with. So it's kind of always going to feel that way. no matter how you write it.
Yeah, and I think it's real. I don't envy the writers or creators of the show. It's a very challenging subject matter to tackle. I just think it's like they were on to something. I feel like in the first episode, and I think they lost their path a little bit throughout the season. It's just too wandery. I think another season of this, with a little bit more hindsight and a little bit more focus, could be really amazing. But like, it never, for instance, from just an HBO to HBO perspective, and like they touch on similar themes. Like Watchmen is such a unbelievably better show in my opinion than this is.
I don't know. I think they're close, man. They're pretty close.
The
two, they're dealing with similar subject matter in completely different ways. So they're really tough to compare in terms of what's actually being offered. But another thing for Lovecraft Country, not to compare to Watchmen, but just another thing that I liked about the show specifically was Michael K. Williams' performance.
I think there's great. There is amazing performances.
Specifically as a standout, Michael K. Williams is phenomenal.
He's the father in that.
He's the father, and he's struggling with his homosexuality, and it's like it's at a time when that wasn't as accepted, or not at all accepted, I should say.
Right.
And it's very subtle how they talk about it, but they don't really make it like an overarching thing for his character. It's not something that he necessarily is even trying to get over. It's just a part of his character, and he's going to struggle his entire life, and he knows that. And I think that's. I'm sorry, I'm going to in depth on his specific performance, but I thought that was very notable that he can display that subtle acceptance of his fate, so to speak. It was very impressive.
He's I think between him and the main character, I can't remember his name now off the top of my head, but their performances are next level good, I think, and it's. To me, it's such a shame that it doesn't reach those levels for me that Watchmen did, where it felt like it was so much more cohesive as a, and this is where that blurry line kind of is the thing, where it's like Lovecraft Country is very episodic. It's like it is not your typical 2020 HBO serialized. It's serialized, but it's not in the same way that you would expect. And maybe that's on me, for like it's doing something different, and I don't like that it's doing something different. Maybe, but it didn't work for me at the same level. But that's fine. I think it's still a good show. Okay, my number 3 is Cobra Kai, seasons 1 through 3. Technically, season 3 came out in 2021. Season 2 was 2020. Season 1 was 2019. 2019, it actually premiered on YouTube. It was a YouTube series, like produced by YouTube. It brings back the main characters from the original
the
Karate Kid stuff, and it's like I understand how this might come off as being like too rote or like too kind of like simple of a show, but I think it does an amazing job of walking a line that feels and fits into this world of an 80s karate movie, right? The world of the Karate Kid, right? Which was already kind of weird and kind of stylized and over the top in the 80s, right? But it brings it into the modern setting. It takes place now. It's contemporary, but it feels like and fits this idea of this over the top 80s thing. But it doesn't ignore that it's ridiculous. There are people in the world.
It can't.
Well, I mean, maybe not. I mean, they could, right? If they wanted to, they could do whatever they want. They could create this hyper stylized world, and all the characters in it live and breathe those things, and that's how it is. But it's not done that way. Ultimately, this is still it's a show about teenagers grappling with high school and each other, right?
That should be the tagline.
Right. And like things are really like just think about how important high school football was, right? And how unimportant it really is ultimately, right? But they make it about karate. It's not about football, it's about karate, and these original characters, the original, it's called Cobra Kai because the original quote unquote villain from the original
Yeah.
series, or the original movie, is he's kind of the main character in the first season, but they also bring back, quote unquote, the Karate Kid into this show.
Danny LaRusso.
Exactly, Danny LaRusso. And there's this instant chemistry between these characters, and like the performances feel although heightened, are gripping. The relationships are interesting. I think the action scenes are a little over the top at times, but again fits that kind of mold of this 80s karate feel. But in the year 2020, it I think succeeds in all the places that you think it would automatically fail at. And I think that's interesting. And ultimately, it's just like it's kind of a ride. It's a little over dramatic. It feels a little soapy maybe at times, but it's cohesive. It fits together in a satisfying way. And I honestly, I know it sounds dumb. I get it. I didn't watch it until a month before season 3 came out, and I binged the first 2 seasons. I was like, man, this stuff is good. It was gripping, and I recommend it. I think there's some interesting kind of they take some interesting they examine things in a way that you wouldn't expect for a show called Cobra Kai, and I get it. I understand why you'd be skeptical, but take my word for it. I think it's worth it, in my opinion.
Okay.
I know you guys haven't seen it. I know.
Haven't seen it. What I've seen of it, it looks very much like a CW show.
It's
like a lot of high
so
school
much
drama.
better than it. It's so much better than the CW shows. It's so much better.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's just it's fine that you like it. I can promise you I'm never gonna watch it. But
Fair enough.
I'm right there with that.
You guys are.
And if I'm missing out on something, that's fine. This show, from what I've seen, doesn't hold any interest for me. I'm glad that you like it.
I'm happy that it exists in terms of like what those movies represented in terms of their place in pop culture, and how it's had a resurgence, a rebirth, and it's living out in a different way, and the original actors are back. I think that's all sweet.
Mm-hmm.
But when you say gripping, it's just I can't get behind it.
Well, I mean, that's how I feel when you say about Tiger King. You're like,
yeah, no, and I was thinking that too.
I mean?
It's the same type of thing. It's like I get what you guys think, like this circus that why would you want to tune into? But it's deeper or whatever than that. So
yeah.
I'm listening to that part of it. So yeah, but I don't know. I just don't know if I'd ever put it on.
And fair enough. I think it's one of those things where like if you're ever just like looking for something to watch, and you don't know, you're kind of in this like limbo mode, and you put it on, I think you'd be gripped. It's hard to justify as like watch this instead of, for some prestige drama or whatever. Like I understand that. I really do. But I think it's worthwhile. And by the way, something I want to mention on the other show before we move on, is that they treat like Mr. Miyagi and his legacy like with so much respect and honor.
Cool.
That I appreciate.
That, and it's like, and his teachings and all the stuff, like they take it so seriously. I saw a behind the scenes video.
Even the Cobra Kai guys, like the guys who were against
No,
him?
like the show is in general. I mean, like there's obviously like the guys who are against them don't have that same respect,
Right,
and then
okay.
and I don't want to reveal how the whole thing plays out, but the like Mr. Miyagi stuff is taken very seriously, and like they go to Japan in season 3, and which is something they never did, by the way. They quote unquote went to Japan for the second or third Karate Kid movie, but they went to Hawaii. It wasn't Japan, and so they actually go to Japan for this movie. And like the actor who plays Daniel LaRusso had this behind the scenes video where he's talking about how important it was for them as a show to go to Japan and to live that. It's just like it's like they take it so seriously, even though it's a show about teenagers, and I find it fascinating, and so again, I get it, but it's good stuff. Trust me. Okay, Jeremy, your number 2 television show for the year 2020.
The Last Dance.
Okay, all right.
That Michael Jordan.
Last
Correct.
Dance.
Is that it's a doc, right? Is this a
It's a documentary series? Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I think it's like 9 episodes, 10 episodes.
This was, for the record, this is like I listened to a couple different podcasts. One of the podcasts I listened to, I'm really a fan of them. They're the MinMax. They're offshoots of the Game Informer show, but they have a pick for their like year end stuff that's like the best work of art for the year. Like, what's the best work of art? They picked The Last Dance for this. It was like they were all of them, video game people, blown away by this series.
Right. Yeah. So I'm in the same vein. Like, I could have put it as my number one. But with my number one, I kind of
don't reveal it. Don't reveal it.
Okay, yeah, that's true. But yeah, this one for me, it was pretty eye opening. I mean, like you know of Michael Jackson, right? Or Michael Jordan.
I know both.
But you think, but for me, it was like, he's an icon, like a Michael Jackson, like like a Kanye West of now, or Wayne Gretzky, a Tiger Woods, right? These iconic figures that are just. They're just famous people that like have done a lot of great things, right?
Right.
But this documentary is able to show you why Michael Jordan is the greatest ever. You know what I mean? Like you know that he's the greatest ever. Oops.
Oh Jesus!
Sorry.
Oh no!
It's okay. It's empty. But this shows you why he's the greatest.
It's still rolling around. It's still rolling around. So he's.
And just the way it's edited and the structure is pretty fascinating. They jump between different seasons, because one of the things that I learned is that he won 6 NBA championships watching this documentary, which is a lot, right? Like, I mean,
6 of any championship,
and then you learn that he won 3 in a row, and then you learn that the other 3 were also 3 in a row. So it's just, and you learn that in between that he retired. So it's just, you're like, holy and then they show you though, like they pace it to where it's like the build up in the playoffs to like each game and each series, but they compare the first one to also the second one that happens in the same decade, but the latter half of the decade. So it's this really good comparison that you see of a Michael Jordan at one point younger, and then like after all these events that have transpired and the battles he's faced against like crazy, other NBA players that he prevented them from winning a ring. Like in that decade, he snatched all the rings from all like these greats that didn't quite attain it because they couldn't beat him.
Because Michael Jordan is around,
yeah. So it just really conveys why you know of Michael Jordan, why you can picture him in your mind, even if you're not a sports fan. So I think like us three, like we have an affection to sports, or certain sports in particular. I think basketball isn't necessarily there. I don't think we're well versed in basketball, but this will kind of convert you, in my opinion. I think it's extraordinary, and on top of that, they have footage here that has never been seen before, that is up-res to the best, of their ability. And it is just shocking seeing this HD footage of this time in the 90s, of this icon, moving from one place to the next place and just dominating. And the words he's saying and how he's just such a role model, like never breaks, never cracks. It makes you such a fan if you weren't before, or it makes you realize why people know the name Michael Jordan, why he's number 23, played for the Bulls. You know what I mean? Like you're gonna understand why if you watch this, and it's super motivational. Like it helped me stay on track with things that I wanna be good at or compete at or whatever. So it was just like life changing while I was watching. I couldn't wait for the next episode because they released them week to week as well. So. Just so good.
Oh, wait. This is a Netflix series that was released week to week?
I don't know what platform it was on. Was it Netflix? Yeah, I think it was Netflix.
It was Netflix.
It was week to week.
That's
so it was
crazy.
really gripping, really really cool to see where they would tease the next, where they go next, and they'd showcase like these legends that he's got to go up against, and just always stacked against him, and the rules were different. It was more physical back then. So it just, you just couldn't wait for the next episode. Like, how is he going to overcome this? How is he going to overcome that? He won 3 in a row, then 3 in a row. Like, it's just, it's so sweet. Like, I love it.
Okay.
It's also one of the, in my mind, sort of the new generation of documentaries. Much more exciting in terms of how it's filmed and how it's edited and put together.
Yeah, so it's so slick.
It really keeps you in
Have you seen it?
No, I've only seen the trailer, but it's like the trailer sold me on it because it's a very exciting trailer. It reminds me of 13th is another documentary I was talking about a lot a few years ago. Normally, a documentary feels dry. It just because it's just throwing information at you. They end up kind of veering towards
lots
the
of
drier
talking
side.
heads. It's like
a lot of that kind of stuff, and unless you're really really interested, you might lose track of what's going on or whatever, right? So it just may be something that's less accessible, and you're less likely to force yourself to watch one. This seems a bit different. It seems like it keeps you excited, and the fact that it's presented as a series means that it ends with whatever their version or their analog of a cliffhanger is, and it makes you want to watch the next episode. Jeremy, is that accurate at all? Or?
Oh, 100%.
I think
I want to watch it again.
It's notable to me that, like, I didn't know this, but that they did release it week to week, which is like Netflix doesn't do that. And I think we as a podcast have been saying the week to week method is in our opinion, I think the best method, right? And there's
for this show.
I don't know. I mean, there's obviously different shows have it works for different stuff, but from a conversational standpoint, I think obviously week to week works best. But that I think is fascinating that they chose a Michael Jordan docu series to do week to week, like to test that. Yeah. That's interesting. And then not only that it was like people were like gripped by it.
Right, and I also want to mention the director. I think it's kind of a younger individual. He did a lot of interviews leading up to it and just kind of talking about it. And it's super fascinating, the making of this documentary, and how much time he was able to interview Michael Jordan and who else he was supposed to get, and how Michael Jordan like wanted to be like, he had a lot of input into it and kind of had to kind of how it was coming across.
Right.
But there's certain points where I think it's brilliant, where they kind of go over what he's worried about and they about how he's perceived. And this is kind of the reason why Michael Jordan wanted this documentary out there. And it really showcases that he just wanted to win, basically at all costs. Like nothing negative at all. It just really tried to bring everyone up to their best around him. And there's a pretty cool episode to where it rubbed people the wrong way, and a lot of people see him as kind of a villain character. So it's super interesting that it's not just like this lovey-dovey, like he's the best ever, end of story. It's like there's a price you pay if you want to be the best ever, and you see it in here, and it's real.
Cool. That is actually really cool. That's because there's no way in the entire world where I would have expected that Michael Jordan would come off as a villain in his own documentary.
He's a very competitive guy. I can imagine that.
Yeah.
Okay, Dan, you're number 2 for 20 year 20.
I put The Boys season 2.
Oh, good pick.
Nice.
I was actually surprised not to see it on other lists, but I think this season took everything that was successful, everything that worked in the first season, and just doubled down on it and made it work again. And it wasn't boring whatsoever. It wasn't repetitive whatsoever. The addition of Stormfront as a villain was very effective. She was a perfect villain for this season. And honestly, I'm just excited to see what season 3 has in store. The show, as much as it's not repetitive, but it is a lot of the same. They're on a mission they're going after Vite. They're, insurgents essentially. So that part is consistent, but the episode to episode dynamics are interesting enough to keep you engaged in the show. And it really is these characters. Carl Urban steals the show every scene that he's in. He's the
Carl
best.
Urban is so underrated as an actor. I don't understand why he's not in more stuff. It doesn't make sense to me. It makes no sense. I
don't know if he's underrated, but he's great in this show.
So good.
He steals the show from anybody that he's in a scene.
It's like not even fair to the rest of the cast, really, when he's on this. Like, yeah.
And it's a cool, mature take on superheroes, which was refreshing when it first came out, less refreshing in the second season, but still
and topical. I feel like it addresses things that feel
Somewhat,
important and real.
Well, yeah, especially with Stormfront this season,
Yeah.
like the whole white
And
nationalist
the
thing.
meme stuff, like all of it is it like it feels like it could have been a story that was taking place in an alternate reality today. You know what I mean?
Sure. Phenomenal show.
I think it's really it's just like really entertaining. Like it's action packed. There's interesting character dynamics. The characters themselves are.
You don't know what's going to happen next. Like really ever.
You don't know
Literally,
what's gonna happen next, and you feel like the show doesn't hold back as well. Like I don't feel like it's tiptoeing around anything.
No.
Like with the Stormfront stuff and with the white nationalist stuff, it kind of like she was a Nazi. You know,
Yeah.
it addressed it head on, and then, like they had characters in the show address it head on, and I thought that was interesting and ambitious of them, of course.
it's I don't think, and by the way, I just mentioned this because we were just talking about it, but like this week to week release schedule, the boys face like major backlash. There's people really upset that the boys came out week to week instead of all in one batch like the first season did.
Right.
And
it's in such recent memory. I would say that's why, because it decided to choose a different format. But I think they gave us the first 2 episodes right off the bat, which I think is a smart choice.
Yeah, it's that like blended methodology that I think that really works. It gets you in, and then now you have to wait a week.
Yeah.
But like, again, I don't want to rehash this argument. I just think it just works better. But it's Amazon's, as of now, their flagship show. They don't really
get better numbers than some Netflix stuff.
Well, and here's
I think it's
by the way,
number 1 actually.
This is really frustrating for me, or for us, or for me specifically, I guess. But like, when we're talking about this stuff in the world of streaming, we have no idea what's successful from a viewership perspective. We have no clue.
Take their word for it.
Yeah, we take their and we kind of have to dilute it from like the conversation happening online, and it's like in the world of like of Nielsen and the world of like box office numbers, you knew what people were watching, and now you don't. You just have to. It's like, well, it's all a secret, and it's like the boys could be a abject failure from a viewership standpoint, but they could be like, we know this is gonna work, and we're just gonna put the money into it, and they could make it out to be like it's the biggest show.
I don't know if it works exactly like that, but as far as we know, it does.
Yeah, well, we don't know, and that's the problem. We just don't know. But right now, it's 100% Amazon's most important show. And so it's not going anywhere anytime soon, at least not till Lord of the Rings comes around.
Boom.
I
Can't wait.
suppose.
That's what it's all about.
That's what it's all about. Fuck the boys. Let's get the Lord of the Rings in here.
No idea.
We don't, because it's so expensive. It's such an anyway. It's really fun to see, and there's that word again, to see mature superhero storytelling done with a big budget. There's there's just nothing like that happening. I mean, the Justice League will kind of be like that, but there'll be less exploding heads probably. But it's just like,
wait and see.
It really feels like comic books of this ilk brought to screen in like the most like earnest way possible, and it's like it's hard not to enjoy it. Love this. The Boys is season 2 is one of my honorable mentions.
It would be mine. I think it was number 4 in mine. I like when you said more of the same. That's kind of how I fell with it. Like, not that it was disappointed at all. It definitely just it did what I needed, and exceeded some things here and there, and I was definitely gripped by it. But I wanted to represent some other stuff.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Ted Lasso is my number 2, and Dan's like, he's leaving. You guys gonna leave? Okay, well, I will mention. I'll talk about Ted Lasso in a larger kind of more a larger sense, and I'll address something that Dan said earlier when he gets back. But Ted Lasso for me I really struggled because I had ever since I created this doc that we're looking at, that we used to kind of like collect our thoughts for this episode. It was my number 1 show for the year of 2020, and there's one specific like reason for that. And again, I'll wait till Daniel's back to kind of dive into it more. But I just think that this show is just so wholesome and I say that despite the fact that they swear like sailors in this show, and it's hardly something for families. It's not a family show, and this is a show that is a Apple TV Plus exclusive, and it stars Jason Sudeikis, and it's an offshoot of a sketch, kind of like Jeremy, help me here. SNL sketch that came to turn into a movie that we both like, comedy. MacGruber. It's like there's no reason that we should have a MacGruber movie, right? But yet here we are, and that MacGruber movie turned out, you know what? It's dumb, but it's really funny, right?
Well, that one's more a parody.
Right, no,
anything,
but
right?
sure, but so was the sketch, right? Like the sketch, the MacGruber sketch and the MacGruber movie are very similar in tone, right?
You know what I mean? It's essentially like a remake of MacGyver, but
yeah,
like
well, exactly, and
funny.
that's true. But what I'm saying is, like, so was the sketch, right? In this case, the Ted Lasso sketch is like so far off from what makes the show great. It's that sketch, and what the idea of the show is ultimately just the kind of like groundwork for the series itself. It just creates the environment for the characters to live in, and it's so much more in depth and more interesting than any sketch like that could ever be. If you're following the MacGruber kind of analogy, it'd be like if it was like the MacGruber stuff, but then it just took itself way more seriously. It was still funny, but it was like it was telling interesting and compelling character stories, and it's really because it's all about the characters.
I had no idea. This is based off a sketch.
This is based off a sketch.
I had no idea.
Yeah, and this is an Apple TV Plus exclusive, and there's not a lot of Apple TV Plus subscribers in the world. But I guess for my money, it's between this and Greyhound, which is that Tom Hanks movie. They're like, that's like the only two good things happening over there. I don't know, like the morning show. I haven't seen. There's other stuff.
There's more coming too.
There's more coming, I'm sure, and they have a lot of money to spend on that stuff, so it's probably gonna be pretty good. But Ted Lasso is a show, and I'm gonna steal the words of another podcaster who I think described it in such a brilliant way that it's like I can't not use it here, which is that it is optimism in the face of cynicism, and it tackles it's in this kind of like silly world of this idea of American football coach going to England to coach a soccer team. It's silly. It's absolutely silly, but that's really not what the show is about. It's about Ted Lasso as a person, as a human, who is this unrelentingly optimistic person. And I think there's been people like that you may have known in your life who it's like, that is annoying. It's not real. Please stop that, right? And this show does not shy away from revealing that about this character, that, hey, guess what? This unrelenting optimism, though maybe over time wins out, is not always the right answer, and that there sometimes is other things that you should be looking at and should be doing, because that's how the world works. And I understand this. Again, it's a very similar way to Cobra Kai, that how this can come off as being stupid, but it's not. It takes itself as seriously as it needs to. Jason Sudeikis is a complex character as Ted Lasso, and it does ultimately make you feel good. This is a show that makes you feel good, and it's not. And Dan, now that you're back, I'll address to something you said before when we were talking on another episode, where you said it feels like you're putting your head in the sand, and I don't know if that's necessarily fair. I've been thinking about that. I don't think it's fair, because ultimately anything we're watching here is escapism, and you choose how you want to use escapism in any way. This is a show that tackles adult problems in an adult way, but through the lens of positivity and optimism. And it feels good to watch. You like the characters. There's very interesting character dynamics. Again, it's not for kids, like I said before. Like they swear like sailors here. It's not your NBC sitcom. It's more complex than that. This is a very good show. I really struggled with putting it as my number one show for this year because it was so gripping for me. I watched the first 3 episodes because I came into it a little bit late, and I was upset that I couldn't watch the whole thing through, because it's so captivating, and it's just like you want to see how things turn out with this character and what he's doing, and yet the trappings are American idiot soccer coach. I get it, but it's so much more than that. It's so much more than that. And they have Giles from Buffy playing a smarmy rich billionaire who was the former owner of the team, and it works so well. That's just one thing that kind of stood out. Is like I was like, where do I recognize this guy from? That is like, duh. And it does frustrate me a little bit because I talk about this show with a lot of enthusiasm, and it maybe comes off in the same way that Ted Lasso's kind of unrelenting optimism can come off as like annoying, but it's really, really good, and I would recommend just giving the first 2 episodes. It's not like one of those shows like you need to watch the whole first season. I think if you watch the first 2 episodes, I think you'll get it and understand it and like it. And if not, the show's not for you. That's fair. But it's really, 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 really good, in my opinion. And it tries to be good in the other definition of the word. And I think it's commendable. So that's my number 2 pick. If I could, it would be my 1A, if possible. But that's what I have to say. And I know you guys haven't seen it, so you have any questions about this series? Any questions about the show?
I don't. No. I'm sorry you feel like you have to defend it so hard, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen it. I don't know anything about it. To comment on the sticking your head into the sand thing, it was really just outside the podcast, a conversation that you and I had where you were pitching both Ted Lasso and Cobra Kai to me, and both of which you were pitching as a way to turn your brain off and experience positivity in different terms, but like that's essentially what you were saying. So that's why I said the head in the sand thing. This Ted Lasso show, I'm sure it's delightful. Jason Sudeikis is amazing. He's a great actor. He's hilarious. The show has everything going for it. I think that it would be a great show. I haven't seen it, so I don't have that experience with it. What I not necessarily bristle at, but what I don't like is the idea that we're actively pursuing optimism and positivity in the face of 2020 being such a bad year, which it was. But the idea to me of deliberately going after only positive or optimistic things means that you're preventing yourself from experiencing that other side of things. You're kind of ignoring that other side of things, which is as valid in a year like 2020, probably more important.
Well, I challenge that, I think, because I've done both, and I can only live in the world that I live in, right? Like I can't choose that. I mean, like 2020 sucks. We agree with that, but it's like I didn't choose this show because I didn't search out this show because of that, right? But coming out of it and having such a feeling of positivity is really nice. And I get that it's like, well, in a world where everything else sucks, it might feel way better, like if it, in a comparative way. But I think there's more to it than that, than just that one piece of it.
Nothing against the show whatsoever. It's about intentions.
Anyway, I recommend it. Highly recommend it. So, now things are getting really exciting. Jeremy, what's your number one show of 2020?
The Mandalorian.
Yeah, that's my number one too.
Interesting.
Yeah. Tell me why.
I mean, season 1, I think I described it more so as a comic book, like with an adventure every episode. But there were a few episodes where I just didn't really care for. I think they took that and made stories and comic book issues and adventures that I want to see, that incorporates lore from Star Wars or characters, and expands them in any little way. Like even exploring the Sand People in a certain way, or the just any race or whatever. It's just so cool to live in that Star Wars world, see it fleshed out, but then see it like represented like slightly different, or make more sense within that world. I just love seeing all that. And then in terms of like spoilers and whatnot, just the characters and where the storylines are going, and who's meeting one another, and all that. To me, it felt very epic, and kind of replaced that movie feel for me basically every Friday night. It's just the level of care put into the show as well. If you watch some of the behind the scenes featurettes with Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau, and seeing George Lucas there, and it's just I just really feel it's a strong representation of what Star Wars can be, and it's trying to get people back, it's trying to bring new people in, and it's just super exciting. I mean, just getting these characters, particularly one, back, not really a spoiler, but because he's kind of a Mandalorian in terms of Boba Fett,
right?
It's just so exciting, and to see where it's going with a show of Boba Fett is pretty cool too. So it just was, like I said, just very epic, and I cared about these mini adventures more so than the first season.
Right. Danny, you didn't put it on your list, but your thought, you obviously reviewed it every week with us. What are your thoughts on it?
We should probably all talk about Mandalorian. It's your number one pick.
Yeah.
It didn't make my list. It's not a bad show by any means, but I feel like it probably rides the Star Wars coattails into being a good show more than other shows do. Like, if it weren't for the Star Wars title, I don't think that this would be an objectively good show. I think there's too much of that lore and the character stuff that's so internal to Star Wars that if you have no familiarity with it, the show is inaccessible. Right. So it's a good show for those of us who have even a casual familiarity with Star Wars.
But in terms doesn't have a casual familiarity with Star Wars, right?
But in terms of the way this show is structured, with those, like Jeremy, you mentioned, those sort of one-off episodes, these sort of Monster of the Week, so to speak, episodes, that was happening in season 2 as well. And I don't think that it contributed to a larger story in season 2 whatsoever. I think if anything, it was kind of not a waste of time, but they were filler episodes. We use that term all the time when we were reviewing the show, filler episodes. I think there's too much of that.
To argue that, I would say to the beginning of this season, I think having those adventure episodes are more accessible than the latter half. So I think those first episodes of Monster of the Week, whatever you want to call it, were so thrilling and exciting and well executed in terms of action and theatrics. I think everyone who isn't even a Star Wars fan was just like, "Hey, I'm watching Mandalorian this Friday."
I think I that's a great point, because the Mandalorian as a show was able to permeate pop culture in the way that like Star Wars at its best was able to do, right? Everyone was interested in it. Everyone was like, I want to do that. I want to see what's going on, what's happening with Baby Yoda, all this stuff, right? I think that's worth mentioning. How much that actually matters in terms of the quality of the show, questionable. But the fact that it was able to engage these people and keep them engaged, the casual fan, I think is important. The reason I put it at number one, and obviously spoilers for my list, but it's number one on my list, and it was between Ted Lasso. But I think it's hard for me to deny, not only the fact that we reviewed it week to week, but also the fact that like how much I enjoyed each episode. Like each one felt gripping, and Well, no, I liked every episode really, maybe except for the second episode, which is that like ice spider one, which is I think.
But even then, that one's crazy.
It's so good. It's like in terms of like how can you do a ice spider episode? You can't really do it any better.
When
than
I was
that,
watching,
right?
I'm like, this is just like top notch entertainment right now. Like this is a movie. This is how well like it just executed so perfectly. Like it made my skin crawl. That whole like
it's really gross. I hate spiders. No.
But that's my point. The fact that we call it an ice spider episode is my point. That is a monster of the week. That is just
sure.
Like there's a crate dragon episode, and there's.
But how is that not entertaining?
It's entertaining because like it's a fun exploration in the Star Wars universe, but there's no real depth of anything there. There's no real character exploration.
But that depth is with Baby Yoda and.
I think there is actually even there. I think in that episode, more than that episode, the season 2 episode, which is also directed by the season finale episode director, the Ant-Man director, I think does more work for character development from a Baby Yoda and Mando perspective than like a lot of the other episodes do.
Sure, but it's a low bar. Like, can we understand, please, that this is a show where the main character wears a mask the entire time?
I think
the other main character speaks a different language or doesn't speak.
Is also a puppet.
What I would say that is, for me, just fleshing out like what. To me, it's mostly representative of Boba Fett and what that character and his job and what he does just kind of fleshes that whole thing out. But it repurposes it in a way to where this character is like a James Bond / Iron Man.
Yep.
Like, jack of all trades type. He's going to get the job done in cool theatrical ways with jetpacks and technology, like very Iron Man-esque, which I think it's funny because Jon Favreau, right? Like it just. Kind of snuck that in there without us really realizing, but it really repurposes that character and makes it more viable as like this action hero. And then on top of that, interacting with really powerful characters and standing on his own and like being able to survive, and all that being made sense throughout season 1 and season 2 and explaining what the armor is and all that. So to me, it's just so highly entertaining and so well executed. I don't necessarily need like deep storylines, but I think they still kind of exist there, and it was nice seeing Pedro Pascal. I think was it 2 or 3 times throughout the season.
Right.
It was super fun seeing those episodes, and even I also think that you can watch this season without watching the first season. I've been telling people to do that too. I just think it's just too fun not to just dive in. Everyone knows who Baby Yoda is and who the Mandalorian is.
Just watch the first episode of the first season and then season 2, episode 1. I mean, you could get away. I wouldn't recommend that personally, but I could see how you could get away with it. You're right, Jeremy. This show is extremely entertaining, and it's extremely entertaining with extremely high budgets. Like the money's on the screen. It looks really good, right? It is, I think, maybe a little thin from a character's perspective. Like, it could be deeper.
It's thin from a character. It's thin from a plot perspective as well.
I don't know if that's
really
fair.
Is.
I don't think that's fair.
Come on. Like, nothing really happens in the show other than them, trying to keep Baby Yoda away from bad guys. I
don't know if that's fair. I don't know if that's fair because look at the I think the first episode of season 2 is probably the best episode of the series of the season and maybe the series.
The first episode of season 2
is the Crate Dragon
episode where it's essentially a Monster of the Week episode. It's a one-off episode.
But it's so much deeper than that. It's so
good. It showcases what the Mandalorian is trying, what Jon Favreau, Dave, what they're all trying to do. It's not trying to repurpose everything and not make it make sense. It's like we're taking our time.
I'm agreeing with what you guys are saying, but what's working in that episode is the visuals. It's not about this character.
No, it's about the world, and ultimately, Star Wars is mostly about the world.
How is that episode about the world?
Because we're going back to a place we know. We're going back to Tatooine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like when you see that big, what's the stupid
Crate Dragon?
The Crate Dragon, yeah.
No, but the thing it eats.
Oh, the Banthas.
Bantha.
Yeah.
Right, like to me, that's what I'm talking about. Is how they repurpose things in just very minor.
Yeah, that's not world building. The world's already been built.
Right. No, but it's using the Bantha exists already, but they're using the Bantha in an interesting way here. They're brushing it with a giant toothbrush. Like that's like there's
Okay.
And
these
then
are like
kinda-
You know what? I
Can't
forgot about the
find
toothbrush.
anyone.
You're right. You're right. I take it all back. I forgot about the giant toothbrush that they used to brush the Banthas with. My mistake. It's a great show.
no, I mean like Dan, I understand where you're bristling here. That it's like this isn't Chernobyl. It's not high drama in that way.
Listen,
Right.
I don't want to be too dramatic about this, but I think if you really think about The Mandalorian without the Star Wars stuff, it's not much of any show.
But
But we can't do that. 'cause
you
Star
can't
Wars is
separate
so
the
I
Star
know,
Wars
I
from
know.
it. You have to.
I'm
keep it
saying
in there.
I'm saying if you take it as a show, the structure of the show, the arc that the characters go on, if you remove yourself from the concepts of Mandalorian
That's
or
tough.
Star Wars, it's not a show.
It's
It's not a show. It's not. I think
yeah. I would
honestly,
say
Dan,
that.
I think if okay, let's do your experiment for a second. Like remove the trappings of Star Wars. You have a bounty hunter,
Badass person.
a bounty hunter with a child who happened to keep a child. Like
With a
that's
myster-
interesting in
with
and
a
of
mysterious-
neither-
with a mysterious past.
Sure,
Right.
sure. I agree with everything that you guys are saying, but neither one of those characters, neither the baby nor the Mandalorian, work if you aren't familiar with Boba Fett or Yoda.
I disagree. I think you
That
could
show
replace.
doesn't work.
No.
I
Replace
think-
the
I think it works
Mandalorian with
both.
any other bounty hunter. Replace the baby Yoda with some
Yeah.
baby child of
Something
any
that's
other
cute,
species.
Something
Whatever.
that's cute.
Right. And you can do a lot of the same stuff here. The Star Wars elements add to it, and ultimately the show is doing a lot of work to build and also rebuild in certain state
Yeah, see
instances.
that's the thing. It's like
Right.
Star Wars has had such a kind of a bumpy road with the new
Mixed,
trilogy
right.
and all that, and it's like this is just taking this like on the grounds approach. We're gonna show you a lot of Star Wars lore and repurpose it a little bit, but then like they just go all in on the season in terms of including these major characters that we've known from the cartoon series or the movies.
And I don't know,
And
Dan.
it,
What
just,
like
it just makes it make
Cameos.
sense. It just feels right.
I don't. Boba Fett's not a cameo in this season. He's
Not at all.
Boba Fett's
Which I thought
beyond
it
it.
would-
Boba
which I
Fett
thought
has
it would
one
be.
episode and then he's sidelined.
He's not.
Afterwards.
But
No,
he's not. That's not. Fair.
I think he's in. I think he's
Apologize.
representing here more than I ever thought. I thought he
Well,
wasn't going to come back until the
To be
end
fair,
of the.
Jeremy, to what you just said, you're absolutely right because he's not at all part of the main trilogy of movies either. He's
He's
barely
a side
footnote.
character. It's crazy. So yes.
Yeah,
well,
he's a
so
fan.
I think can we
he's
give
a
the
fan favorite side
we
character.
give the show credit for taking a fan favorite side show character and giving that character more
landing it?
depth and
Yeah.
making him interesting and exciting.
I'll agree only insofar as that he is a sideshow character. We should move on though.
All right, fair enough. And if I can, because it's also my number one pick, I'll just add my kind of final thought on it, which is that
So
for
not
me,
moving on.
I just want to, again, you guys don't have to
Sorry,
comment
yeah.
on this. You don't have to comment on this. I just wanted to make sure I mention this because I think it is important for me as a Star Wars fan who is a little bit who looks at Star Wars a little bit more in depth. I take a deeper look at Star Wars, maybe deeper than it should be looked at, in someone might say. But it really rewards that. And if you're someone who's been watching the Clone Wars, who likes the world building, and there's a lot there for you, and it felt really rewarding for me in that way. I'll say that the season finale, although very exciting, I think is problematic in its own ways, but at the same time sets up a really interesting season 3. And something that I would say about all of season 2 is that none of us knew where this season was going. We only really had a couple inklings. Hey, Ahsoka would be coming, and by the way, that episode is perfect. And after that, we were talked about it week to week. We were like, I don't know what's coming next. And they brought in, and they managed to find a way to make it interesting on a week to week basis, and we didn't know. It wasn't predictable. I think that's fair. At least to give it a little bit of credit on that side. I don't know.
Yep.
Okay. Let's talk about, Dan, your number one pick.
So I went with The Expanse season 5.
Also sci-fi. Interesting.
Actual sci-fi, yes, that's right. Real sci-fi.
Real? That's not fair, Dan. Come on. Okay, science fantasy is Star Wars. Okay, fair enough.
Sure.
Yeah.
The Expanse is at a really interesting point in the the lifeline of a show,
The expansion.
if you will. Yes. So with sci-fi in particular and shows in general, the first couple seasons you have to really introduce the concept, and you have interesting characters, sure, but it's really more about the sci-fi concept,
building,
what's happening,
building
the world,
and making
right,
setting the stakes, all that
so
stuff.
The Expanse seasons 3 and 4 is at a point now where it has established a quote unquote world, and now it's really more character driven than anything else. Season 5 is notable because it's at a point now that these characters, some of the main characters that were secondary or tertiary characters, now have their own story arcs. They've branched off into their own areas, and they're leading their own story arcs. Very rewarding for somebody who's been watching the show from day one. Very rewarding for anybody who's read the books. I do think obviously you need to watch the other seasons before you watch this one, but it's perfect sci-fi TV. There's one episode in season 5 that's kind of a little iffy, and it's just like you can tell that the actors are in a fake spaceship, like acting like a movie.
Right.
It's a little iffy. But if you remove that, I think it's really rewarding to see how far the show has evolved from season 1, and how these characters and all the actors as well, still on board, have invested into the show, and really like they're a family and they live it and they want the show to be successful. I believe season 6 is going to be the last season, unfortunately.
That was what I wanted to bring up. It's like if knowing that the show is coming to an end, do you feel like how do you feel about that? And there's and by the way, that's not necessarily to say that the show can't be picked up by somewhere else.
Right.
It still might be, but if
what I would say to that, I know what you're getting at.
Yeah.
The authors of the books are very heavily involved with the show,
right,
more so than George was with Game of Thrones.
Oh yeah,
so
hard, low bar.
Low bar. He wrote George R. R. Martin wrote at least an episode for the first
couple episodes,
5 seasons, 4 or 5 seasons. He wrote one at minimum, one per season rather. These guys are doing I think like 2 or 3 per season, but regardless of that, they're in the writers' room. Like they're very heavily involved.
Right.
It's not like they're not showrunners necessarily.
How many are there?
There's 2 of them, 2 writers. James S.A. Corey is the name, but it's a pen name of 2 different people.
Interesting.
For the books.
Why is that pen names? Just use your real names. It's crazy.
It's
Anyway,
the way it works. Given what I know of the books, I think this is coming to sort of a natural conclusion for this series. There's some things that the books do that I don't think would translate well to TV.
Right.
So I think they're gonna. It's unfortunate, and I'm hoping it's not gonna be the same situation as Game of Thrones, where they kind of condense the last season and try to fit so much.
That
in,
would be challenging, yeah.
Because there's a lot. But what'll happen is, if anybody's familiar with the books, is we're probably gonna skip. There's a period where the characters all age up by like a good 20 years. We're gonna skip that.
Giant. You think
some of the characters?
You think they'll do it like so? They'll do it. So this is what they did with. I'm gonna use a sitcom as an example, but with New Girl, they did a time jump for the final season. Is that what you expect for the final season of this show?
I'm hoping not. There's a no. I guarantee there won't be, because I know the story that they're going to tell in the remainder of season 5 and what's left for season 6.
Right. So
it just means that the last couple books that I'm familiar with, they're going to probably exclude from the actual story of the show.
Well, doesn't that ultimately then leave the door open for, hey, we can do a time jump and then bring the show back at any time?
If it happens the way that I'm foreseeing, the Expanse season 6 could end, and there could be another Expanse reboot series in 5 years that picks up 20 years later, book time.
Interesting.
Potentially. But who knows? Either way, though, the show itself really rewards watching from day one, of course, but just watching in general. Like all sci-fi shows, and even Ted Lasso, you mentioned, like you have to watch a couple episodes, of course, but once you get over that hump, it's very.
I have watched a couple episodes, and it was hard. I'm gonna try again.
You gotta watch it.
I'm gonna try again, but man, it was those first couple episodes are tough, and it's like with any TV show, that's always a factor. I think. And the first couple episodes of New Girl are hard to watch.
And it's sci-fi. Sci-fi is not always accessible. Yeah. It's a weird. There's space zombies. There's humans living on asteroids. It's a weird sci-fi world, but it's worthwhile once you understand all that kind of stuff. It's a beautiful story. So
okay,
that's my number 1.
All right. Well, that covers television. I'll just quickly mention. We already mentioned our disappointments. Dan, do you have any disappointments for this year?
I didn't do any disappointments.
Jeremy, did you?
No.
Okay, so I'll just do quickly honorable mentions. I'll mention Harley Quinn season 1 and 2. This is a animated series on HBO Max. Well, it is on HBO Max now. This was a show that was on DC Universe, and was, I think, it wasn't even really close. It was by far DC Universe's most popular show, and I think rightfully so. It's really witty. It's smartly written. It tackles the Batman universe. Obviously, it's a Harley Quinn show, in a really fun way. And there's the word again, but it never takes anything too seriously. In a way that I think a Harley Quinn show should kind of. It doesn't feel like it needs to treat Bane as some scary menace. It can take Bane and kind of and play with him in a way that that you might expect, in a way that if you looked at it from a pop culture standpoint, right? Like, hey, Bane was kind of silly if you looked at it in the right way.
It's not only that. I think it's that you're looking at these characters through Harley Quinn's perspective. That's the point, that she can be irreverent because of her character.
Well, that and I think that's important too. But I think that's it's true across the whole board. And I think the acting is top notch. I think everyone who's voice acting here is great. They treat there's deep DC universe cuts here. I think that rewards people who are fans of the DC stuff. They don't shy away from really anything, and they tackle same-sex marriage, and they tackle and all these kind of things that you wouldn't really make sense in a Harley Quinn show, but it makes it all feel like it fits and is a part of a whole, and it's ultimately just super entertaining. It's very funny. I think it's like one of the funniest shows I watched this last year. There was a lot of worry about whether the show would come back following DC Universe, the streaming service's kind of demise and being melded into HBO Max. But because of how popular the show is, it's now become a headliner for HBO Max. So HBO Max is bringing it back for season 3, and the season 2 finale leaves it on like a really interesting note. There's like it sets it, the world that season 2 of Harley Quinn ends in is really unlike any DC Universe world you've been in. There's a lot of weird stuff that's happened, and you're like, okay, this is all about the characters anyway, so let's see what happens. I'm fascinated by what's going to come next. Their ability to make fun of, but also at the same time, kind of pay homage to some of the sillier things that have happened, like through either film or television throughout the DC kind of span, is like, I think, geniusly smart. I think that like they make it clear that this is something that not to be taken seriously, and at the same time can take the serious parts of its own show seriously enough that you feel invested in the outcomes and the characters. It's really smart. It's just a really smart show. It's very funny. Highly recommend it. The first 2 seasons, and they're only half an hour each episodes, and they're only a handful of episodes per season. So check them out and get yourself ready for season 3, which is supposed to be coming, I think early 2022, which is, I feel like, a ways off, but animation often takes that way. So the show was basically dead for several months before it was revived. Dan, I know you were kind of prickly on it when I kind of showed you episodes of it. Did you ever go back and watch more?
No,
or no?
No. I feel like I'm coming off as too prickly when you say it like that. The show, though, it's a cartoon, and it has those sort of cartoon trappings of the overly emphatic goofiness that
it's yes. Mm-hmm.
I find unpalatable, and I know that there's probably good writing, and it's hilarious. I absolutely did watch the show and laugh.
Yeah.
From what you showed me, but I don't know. I found that the positive gain from laughing at DC stuff wasn't offset by the negative of making fun of DC stuff, I guess, if that makes sense.
That's fair. I kind of like, if you are someone who's like who holds the DC lore in really high irreverence, you're gonna have a hard time accepting that this is not. It takes none of that seriously. It will take anything that you think is cool and serious and make fun of it.
It's not that I'm particularly more reverent of DC than Marvel or anything like that. It's just like the irreverent nature of just goofing off. Like, it's a cartoon. Like that's what Animaniacs is back in the day.
It kind of is. It has a similar kind of tone to Animaniacs, but but instead of like pop culture generally, which Animaniacs used as its kind of like, it uses the DC universe.
Okay, so I guess what I'm saying is I get the gimmick, and it doesn't work on me.
All right, fair enough. Jeremy, have you seen any of it?
I have not.
I think you'd like it. Check it out. Okay, and then also The Boys season 2 is also my honorable mention. So that covers that. the question here is: do we continue to talk about the games of this year?
A few other honorable mentions as well.
Oh, do you? Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to skip over yours. I apologize.
Well, they're very minor, but they're
Important.
obscure.
Yeah,
obscure. So like,
they're important to you.
Kingdom, it's on Netflix, so it's less obscure, but it's a zombie series set in feudal Korea.
Excuse me.
Exactly. So it's all subtitles. Fair warning. I know that some people have issues with that. But it's all set in, again, feudal Korea. There is a sort of zombie plague. So imagine fighting zombies with katanas.
Is this like Train to Busan kind of in that?
It's similar because it's Korean and zombies.
Right. And I feel like those are really common factors in the
different time period, of
right.
course.
Yeah.
Train to Busan is contemporary Korea. This is feudal Korea.
Right.
So, it's a lot of katanas, a lot of samurai style. I don't know if that's the right term to use in this context, but imagine samurais versus zombies. I honestly shouldn't need to sell it any more than that.
Yeah. Zombies are gonna lose to katanas.
I would say that it's a bit conventional in terms of like the story, because there's the whole political side of things too. It's Game of Thrones-esque in that sense. Like there's a power struggle for the sovereignty of the nation, right? So there's the king and the queen and the prince, and blah blah blah. It has all that. It's a little on the nose in terms of that stuff about honoring one's country and whatnot. But it's still it's a great journey. I highly recommend the show. It's, again, available on Netflix. The other one I put on here, though, is Blood Machines. Not available on Netflix. Not available on any streaming platform other than Shudder.
Man, I've honestly, people talk about things that come out on Shudder, and they're like, "This shit is great. You should watch it."
It's phenomenal. Honestly, it's mind blowing. I wish that I could, and I could. I just don't. But I wish that I could support Shudder more. I'm not as into horror as other people are. This show is a Shudder exclusive, and it's phenomenal, but the rest of the exclusive stuff is a bit outside of my wheelhouse.
Did you watch, and this is just a Shudder tangent, but did you watch, I don't even know what it's called, but it's a Shudder exclusive, but it's basically a bunch of people telling stories around it's not a campfire, but like a similar idea.
I haven't.
Okay. I've heard it's like really, really cool. In the sense that it's like, it's just people telling stories. It's not really a thing, but
Shudder, for anybody who's not familiar, is a streaming service exclusively for horror movies. Blood Machine specifically just to sell the show. Honestly, if you look it up on YouTube, you'll be sold. But it's a very cyberpunk-esque.
You used cyberpunk a couple times today.
I know. Again, that's one of those themes because sci-fi is another one of the themes. But the Blood Machines is the concept of these interstellar spaceships that are also sentient. I guess they're blood machines. They eat people, or they have a consciousness or a sentience of some sort. And
they're like batteries or humans, or
some of the people, there's people that come out of the machines that are just naked ladies that are like the soul of the machine. It's messed up. It's really hard to explain, and I'm not great at it. It's very hallucinogenic. I promise you, if you look it up on YouTube, you'll be sold. The other thing I would say about it is the music is all scored by this person named Carpenter Brute, it's all like 80s sort of synth kind of style.
Sure.
And it's all the stuff that you'll watch on YouTube is like an 80s style music video about this kind of stuff.
I love 80s synth. I love it.
I'm not doing it any sort of justice, but it deserves to be on the list, and you should do yourself a favor and watch it, or at least the trailer.
Okay. So that brings us to games, and here's what I propose.
What's that?
I propose we take a break and we do a TOB Games episode that covers these games separately.
Because we've been doing this for 3 hours?
Because we're at 2.5 hours. Okay. Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Mm-hmm. How does everyone feel about that?
I'm down.
Okay. Cool. With that in mind, then let's wrap up here.
That was a lot. Yeah.
and I think without diving too deep into this, but I think there is obviously we haven't talked about it specifically, but COVID was a major influence on not only the film industry, but because of how it affected the world, affected how we watched movies and television this year. And I think it's important to mention that. It affected every aspect of our lives, which comes down to obviously not only the podcast, but the things we watched and how we reacted to them.
Sure.
And I think we just need to mention, it just has to be mentioned. To not do so would be, I feel like, would be a mistake. And I think if we're looking forward to next year, I think, there's a couple movies we're looking forward to. Dune, Top Gun 2, Marvel movies again. We haven't had any of those in a year. But I mean, those were things we were excited for last year. And we're on a precipice where the theater industry as we know it could completely collapse. And I think, Jeremy speaking to Tenet, a movie we both saw in theaters, I think that would be a net loss for society. And that sucks. And we're not there yet. We don't know. There's a lot of things that could happen in 2021 that we just don't know about, right? Things that might not even be COVID related, right? But this show tries to look at the film and television and games at times that are coming out and try to analyze it, and we analyze it through the lens of the world that we live in because we have no other way to do that. That's the only way we can. And this year, I think, look back at our picks and selections from this year, and feel free to criticize us or look at what we did and say and think about how COVID might have affected those decisions. I think that in and of itself is fascinating, and there's just so many factors you can't even fathom. We can't even figure it out. There's just no way to even think about it. And it's mostly negative, right? It's like, is there anything good? Here's the question I guess I would pose to you guys. Is there anything that's good that came out of 2020 that you'd like to highlight here, as something, to lighten the mood before we wrap up? And then again, by the way, we'll talk about the games of the year in a TOB Games side episode.
You got anything, Jeremy?
Not really, no.
All I would say to that, first of all, no. Almost everything that's happened in 2020 has not been positive. I can't. I have a hard time of thinking of anything genuinely positive. I think there are things that are comparatively less negative, and blah blah blah. Right? It's all relative. Whatever. I hope that one of the things that comes out of this year is that people in general are more able and willing to slow down a bit, and it didn't really surface in terms of our movie picks. It's not like it's not like I found some sort of newfound appreciation for movies, but I think one thing that's happened from COVID, and it's not a positive or a negative, but it can be it can be construed as positive, is the idea that you can slow down and focus on what you need to focus on, and I think a lot of people, myself included, maybe to a degree, were probably too busy back then.
In the before time.
In the before time.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have some sort of like overarching sort of message or anything like that, but I hope that if there is a silver lining, it can be that we stop thinking in terms of like being first to everything and rushing into everything.
Sure. No, I feel that. And I just back to the kind of conversation we were having before about the head in the sand stuff, and without getting into the depth of it, I think I gravitated to things that did feel more positive in a world that felt very negative, and it's like how much is conscious versus unconscious. It's hard to say, but certainly I think that did play a role in how I looked at the things that I consumed this year. I mean, in a typical year, in a year that where there wasn't a global pandemic, I don't think I'm looking back and considering my mental state in comparison to the things that I liked in that year. I don't think I'm really thinking about that. It's just like, because it's always in flux. It's like, well, what mood was I in when I watched 1917 versus what mood was I in versus when I watched Wonder Woman 1984? It's hard to quantify. But what I'm saying is, taken as a whole, it's I think more obvious that it played a role, that it had an effect. And I'm not saying that it having effect is a negative. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that it's interesting to be cognizant of how the world was what was happening in the world, how that affected you, and the things that you consumed, and that because that's what we're ultimately talking about here. What did you consume? Was it whether it was books, games, television, movies, anything, right? How did that affect you? This is one of those interesting cases where you can kind of look back and say you responded to things in a certain way, and there's no right and wrong answer to it. It just I think I find it to be fascinating, if at all also challenging.
So what you're saying is that as a response to external stimuli, you focus more on positive.
Well, no, I'm thinking in retrospect, sure.
Yeah. Okay. That's all I'm asking. Yeah.
But I don't necessarily think that that's right or wrong. I just in my perspective, it's just like, hey, you can easily, it's more easily quantifiable.
You notice a pattern.
Yeah. Okay. And you can't normally do that because your mood is often more in flux in a normal year.
Sure.
And it's not been that way this year, or at least less so. I think. Jeremy, what do you think about any of that? Big sigh. I agree. That's a good point.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add. I just think we didn't talk about the video games, but like that was something that was upped a bit more as a silver lining, if you will.
We'll talk about that
in terms of connecting people and spending time, I guess.
Definitely.
But yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay. Yeah, and we'll dive into that deeper in the next episode. And so look for TOB Games episode in the next little bit. And we'll cover our top 3 of the year, and then look also for a Wonder Woman 1984 review in the next little bit, and then we'll jump back into news. There isn't a lot of news, obviously, lately. Nothing really happens over the holidays, and there's bigger things happening in early January. So, by the time we get back to the new stuff, there should be some interesting things to talk about, and some more things to watch, obviously, as well. But before we sign off here, I just want to again say thank you to everyone who throughout this year listened to us talk about stupid shit for multiple hours. And too many hours. You could argue too many hours. And not only that, there's people out there who also contributed their hard-earned money towards what we're doing, and I think that that can't be understated. It means so much. It really does. It helps motivate. It helps to fund the actual the expenses, but it just so much more than that. There is a factor that you can't calculate, an intangible that really and whether you donated money or commented on a post or sent me a message or sent us an email, they're all, in my opinion, equal in the fact that they show that people care, which is really, 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 really important. The world is a very dark and scary place in these days, and we have listeners all over the world, and that's not always necessarily true. It's not always necessarily as dark or as scary in certain places of the world, but for us, it has been, and having people tell us that what we do is important and that what we have to say matters to them, it means a lot. It really does, and it's mattered a lot for all the other years too, but this year in particular has felt especially trying at times, and small acts of kindness go that much further, and just telling people that you like or care about their stuff that they put out every week or every couple weeks. And I know we haven't been super consistent from a podcast perspective this year as we might have liked to be, but just saying that, hey, you know what, I'm still listening and I still care and I still like what you're doing. It means so much. And I really wanted to say thank you. And if you're still listening now, that you are the person that matters.
They're the only ones listening now.
You're the ones who are doing
that,
and I thank you. And I really appreciate it. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you. And I presume Daniel and Jeremy feel the same way. So So I think we'll wrap it up there. 2020 was an interesting year. 2021 should also be very interesting. We'll be podcasting the entire time, and we look forward to having these conversations as we go forward. Make sure to follow us on all of the social media platforms for updates. Head over to our website, towerofbabblepodcast.com or towerbabble.ca to find everything we do. And we'll be talking to you more throughout the year, and we look forward to doing so. Thank you.